Palpatine is one of the most fascinating figures in the galaxy's history. There is enough to his story, his fears, his obsessions, his contradictions, his methods, to fill entire nights. This is everything we know about the man behind the Empire, told from beginning to end. Every ancient Sith who ever lived would have judged Palpatine as a failure. Not because he failed to gain power, but because he destroyed everything the Sith stood for while winning. This judgment is possible because ancient Sith preserved their philosophy through spirits, holocrons, and temples that still function thousands of years later. On Moraband, Darth Bane's presence lingers in the ancient tombs, demonstrating a philosophy that lasted 1,000 years. On Malachor, the temple continues testing seekers thousands of years after its construction, guarding secrets that have been buried with the dead for millennia. Lord Momin's consciousness survived within his mask for just as long, and when Darth Vader recovered it, Momin evaluated his training and found it corrupt at the source. Exar Kun's spirit achieved similar persistence in the Yavin 4 temples, influencing those who entered for 4,000 years after his death. These preserved consciousnesses contain the values and judgments of their era, allowing us to measure Palpatine against standards recorded in Sith tradition. Across both canon and legends, from the old Sith Empire to Darth Bane's rule of two, Sith philosophy remained remarkably consistent. Whether ruling openly or hiding in shadows, knowledge preservation, succession through combat, and eventual open rule defined what it meant to be Sith. These principles allowed the Sith to survive for 5,000 years, despite repeated defeats and near extinction. By these standards, Palpatine betrayed the entire tradition. 5 specific reasons explain why every ancient Sith would have despised him, despite his unprecedented success. First, the ancient Sith established succession through proven strength thousands of years before Bane formalized the rule of two. In the Golden Age of the Sith, Marka Ragnos ruled the Sith Empire for over a century, and when he died, his spirit appeared to declare that the victor between Naga Sadow and Ludo Kresh would rule, because strength determined leadership. The strongest rose, while the weak fell, and every transition of power proved the new ruler deserved the position. This was not cruelty, but philosophy. The Sith Order could only grow stronger if its leaders earned their place through demonstrated superiority. When Naga Sadow's empire collapsed after his failed invasion of the Republic, he fled to Yavin 4, but still trained Frida Nad in the ways of the Sith. Nad eventually surpassed his master and claimed power for himself on Onderon. Centuries later, according to Tales of the Jedi, Exar Kun sought out Nad's spirit for instruction, then destroyed that spirit to prove his own superiority and claim the title of Dark Lord. Each generation overthrew the previous because that overthrow demonstrated growth. For millennia, this cycle defines Sith succession. Student surpasses teacher, takes the mantle, trains the next generation, and eventually falls to a stronger successor. Darth Bane studied these ancient traditions and preserved their core philosophy in the Rule of Two. He reduced the number from thousands to 2, but the principle remained the same. The apprentice must eventually surpass and destroy the master. In the Darth Bane trilogy, he informed his apprentice Zana that when her power eclipsed his, he would become expendable, and that she must eliminate him to claim the mantle of Dark Lord. He accepted this future and planned for it, understanding that his death at her hands would prove the Sith grew stronger with each generation. Similarly, in the Clone Wars episode Sacrifice, his presence on Moraband still challenged visitors to kill him to gain his place, demonstrating that this ancient principle survived through his reforms. Bane acknowledged he might never see the Sith triumph, accepting that centuries might pass before victory. He reflected that the path ahead would be long and difficult, potentially taking years, decades, or even centuries before the Sith could strike at the Jedi once more. Though he himself might not live to see the triumph of the dark side, those following him would carry on his legacy. Bane built a system expecting he would never witness its ultimate success, accepting his own mortality as necessary for the tradition's strength. Though Palpatine achieved everything the ancient Sith and Bane dreamed of, he refused to be replaced. A millennium of patient planning culminated in total victory when the Jedi fell, the Sith ruled, and the galaxy bowed to a Dark Lord. However, he then did something no ancient Sith or Baneite successor ever imagined possible. The Legends novel Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader reveals his true intention. Once Sidious achieved immortality through the dark side, there would be no real reason to have an apprentice except to honor tradition. He planned to rule alone forever, transforming succession from a sacred principle into a ceremonial gesture without purpose. Both Plagueis and Sidious believed they had transcended Bane's system. According to the Darth Plagueis novel, Plagueis maintained that the rule of two had ended with their partnership. They would rule together, immortal, never needing successors. Sidious killed him for that belief, then adopted the exact same philosophy himself. Once he achieved immortality, he planned to rule alone with powerless apprentices who could never threaten him. Plagueis failed because he thought the rule of two no longer applied to him. Sidious failed for the same reason. Vader discovered the suit was never meant to make him stronger, but to keep him weak. He recognized that the damaged body and constant pain were designed to ensure that the apprentice could never challenge his master. Sidious did not save Vader on Mustafar out of compassion, but allowed him to burn and then rebuilt him weaker than before. When Vader confronted Sidious about this, gesturing to his scarred face and mechanical limbs, he asked whether these were the faces of victory. Sidious could not answer. Palpatine revealed his true philosophy when he told Vader that Vader's power was his power. This was not the rule of two, but ownership. Bane expected apprentices to grow until they could kill their masters. Palpatine expected Vader's strength to remain an extension of his own will forever. His strategy remained clear throughout his reign: maintain whatever apprentice survived as long as they remained controllable rather than superior. Ancient Sith and Baneite traditions alike required stronger successors to replace weaker masters, but Sidious inverted this principle completely. The second reason involves how ancient Sith preserved knowledge for future generations, while Palpatine hoarded it for himself. On Malachor, the ancient Sith embedded their philosophy into architecture itself. The temple's holocron waited thousands of years, guarded by a presence that tested seekers with questions about knowledge and power. Anonymous Sith who died millennia ago still taught students they would never meet, and though their names were forgotten, their teachings endured. Freedon Nad exemplified this dedication to teaching across generations. 4 centuries after his death, his spirit still sought Force sensitives to instruct. According to Tales of the Jedi, his ghost promised to find and teach any worthy student wherever they went. This was not passive preservation, but active membership. Nad understood that a Sith Lord's duty extended beyond their own lifetime, and death was not an excuse to stop teaching. Nad died once and taught for 400 years. Palpatine died twice and taught no one. Ancient Sith created holocrons recording their knowledge of sorcery, alchemy, and the dark side. Each generation added to the collective understanding, building a library of dark side wisdom that spanned millennia. In the Rebels episode, The Holocrons of Fate, the Bendu described Sith holocrons as keepers of shadow lore, warning that combining them could reveal any secret, wisdom, or destiny through the Force. Ancient Sith recorded their teachings so future generations could build upon them and potentially achieve levels of insight no single Sith could reach alone. Darth Bane understood this ancient principle and nearly killed himself preserving it. In the Darth Bane trilogy, Bane failed 3 times creating his holocron. Each attempt took months of gathering rare crystals and fashioning intricate matrices, only to end in glimmering dust. He kept trying anyway, because holocrons had been the most valuable tool for passing on the legacy of great Sith Lords for many centuries. Bane understood that knowledge must survive the one who holds it, and personal triumph meant nothing if the wisdom died with the victor. He succeeded on his fourth attempt because preserving knowledge for those who came after mattered more than any personal frustration. Palpatine had access to everything those ancient Sith created, yet used none of it to build forward. Plagueis showed Sidious authentic Baneite holocrons containing wisdom accumulated by generations of Sith Lords, each acting to the collective understanding of the dark side. Sidious studied them, learned from them, and understood their purpose completely, but never created one himself. Instead, he placed forgeries in the Jedi Temple as Sith disinformation while hoarding real knowledge. These fake holocrons served as deceptions designed to mislead anyone who found them. Ancient Sith recorded wisdom for successors, while Palpatine recorded lies for enemies, and nothing for the future. Sidious even acknowledged that ancient Sith possessed the very immortality knowledge he sought, but it was lost due to poor preservation. He understood the lesson that failure to properly preserve knowledge meant losing it forever. Then, repeated the exact same mistake by pursuing immortality secrets while creating nothing that would survive him. For the third reason, Lord Momin directly condemned Palpatine's teaching after surviving for thousands of years. In the Darth Vader 2017 comic series, Momin's consciousness had survived within his mask, giving him a perspective no living being possessed. When he evaluated Vader's training, he believed that he had been poorly taught about what the dark side is and why the Sith must serve it. He assessed that Vader's master was either ignorant or hoarding knowledge and expressed sadness at seeing the Sith become Jedi-obsessed weaklings. This represented an ancient Sith explicitly condemning modern Sith philosophy based on standards preserved across millennia. Momin explained what Palpatine refused to accept. The dark side does not serve its users, but rather, they serve it. If the Sith glorify the dark side through their acts, their work, and their art, it gives them power and even life eternal. His own survival proved this point, as he noted that empires had risen and fallen since his birth and great ages of the galaxy had passed, yet he still remained. Thousands of years had passed, and he persisted through proper service to the dark side, while Palpatine would die at his apprentice's hands because he tried to make the dark side serve him rather than the reverse. The ancient Sith understood that the dark side is sacred but also hungry, and it must always be fed. Those who serve it properly receive power, but those who try to hoard it or make it serve personal ambitions find themselves consumed. Momin survived thousands of years, while Palpatine died within one generation, proving which philosophy actually worked. He posed one question that destroys everything Palpatine taught. He asked Vader why, if the greatest power in the galaxy was truly his to control, his wife was dead. She was not alive because the teaching had failed, and the promise was a lie. Palpatine told Anakin the dark side could prevent death, yet Padme died anyway. The dark side grants power to those who serve it properly, not those who try to command it for personal desires. Momin understood this truth, while Palpatine never did. The fourth reason involves how ancient Sith trained apprentices as genuine successors, while Palpatine manufactured disposable weapons. The Korriban academies trained dozens of students simultaneously, with masters dedicating years to developing their potential. The weak died and the strong rose, but every student received genuine instruction in Sith philosophy, combat, and the dark side of the Force. Ancient Sith masters wanted their apprentices to surpass them because superior apprentices meant a stronger order. Training a successor was not a burden, but a duty, and the greatest Sith Lords were remembered as much for who they trained as for what they conquered. The tombs on Korriban were designed not just as monuments, but as final tests, continuing to teach any student worthy enough to survive their trials. Star Wars: The Old Republic shows that Tulak Horde personally trained warriors who went on to become legendary in their own right. Mark Aragnos mentored an entire generation of Sith Lords during his century of rule, shaping the very nature of Sith civilization. Even the spirits of dead Sith continued to instruct the living, appearing to guide promising students toward their destiny. The ancient Sith understood that investing in apprentices strengthened the entire order and ensured the tradition would survive any individual's death. Palpatine, however, treated every apprentice as a tool with an expiration date. In the Rebels episode Twilight of the Apprentice, Maul explained that the Sith took everything from him by ripping him from his mother's arms, murdering his brother, using him as a weapon, and then casting him aside. He recalled that he once had power, but now had nothing. This was not the complaint of a failed apprentice who lost in fair combat, but the testimony of someone who was never given the chance to succeed. In the Legends novel Darth Plagueis, Sidious admitted that Maul was not an apprentice and not someone who could ever aspire to become a true Sith Lord, but simply someone skilled in stealth and combat who could be eliminated when no longer needed. This represented disposal through convenience rather than succession through strength. Maul was never trained to surpass his master, but only to serve until he was no longer useful. When Obi-Wan Kenobi defeated him on Naboo, Sidious did not mourn a potential successor, but simply acquired a new tool in Count Dooku. Dooku received the same treatment, and when Anakin Skywalker proved more promising, Sidious engineered Dooku's death without hesitation. Every apprentice was disposable, every successor temporary, every heir designed to fail. Even after Sidious abandoned him, Maul still sought an apprentice because the Sith drive to train a successor ran that deep. On Malachor, Maul claimed Ezra Bridger as his apprentice, and he genuinely wanted Ezra to join him. Maul had lost his brother, Savage Opress, and spent years alone, and he saw in Ezra a potential companion and successor. He taught Ezra that anger was a wellspring and that passions give strength. Yet Maul was so broken by Sidious that the only way he knew to build a relationship was through manipulation and exploitation. He used their force bond to torment Ezra, tried to sever him from his friends, and ultimately used him to draw out Obi-Wan Kenobi. Ancient Sith trained successors to carry on their legacy, but Maul could only replicate what Sidious had done to him. Palpatine's corruption ran so deep that even the genuine impulse to train an apprentice became twisted into exploitation. Finally, the ancient Sith who founded and shaped the Order would condemn how Palpatine achieved his victory. Ancient Sith valued strength proven through direct confrontation. On Malachor, the scale of ancient Sith ambition remains visible in stone. The temple was not a hidden bunker, but a monument powerful enough that the Jedi attacked with thousands of warriors in open battle. The ancient Sith announced their power to the galaxy. They fought openly, died openly, and left monuments to their strength that still stand millennia later. The petrified warriors on Malachor testified to a battle so massive it transformed both sides into stone, yet the temple survived as a testament to Sith resolve. Order 66 was the opposite. Clones executing hidden programming, shooting generals in the back, betraying commanders who trusted them. Ki-Adi-Mundi was gunned down by soldiers he led. Troops gunned down Aayla Secura, and Plo Koon's own wingmen shot down his starfighter. The Emperor achieved victory through manufactured crises, Senate votes, and soldiers who did not even know they served the Sith cause. Ancient Sith would have called this cowardice, not conquest. This deception would have disgusted Ajunta Pall, who, in Knights of the Old Republic, founded the Sith Order on Korriban with the explicit intention of building something that would outlast him. Paul and the other Dark Jedi exiles created a civilization, not a conspiracy. They built temples, established academies, and trained generations of successors. Thousands of years after his death, his tomb still taught lessons to those who entered, and his ghost still reflected on the legacy he had created. Palpatine, however, structured everything around his permanent survival, then allowed the Order to die with him. Paul would see the Emperor as an anti-founder who destroyed what the first Dark Lord created. For 5,000 years, ancient Sith failed to destroy the Jedi, yet Palpatine succeeded and then destroyed the Sith himself. The Great Hyperspace War ended in Naga Sadow's defeat, and Exar Kun's War concluded in the same failure. Mandalorian Wars and Jedi Civil War weakened the Republic but never broke the Order. Even the massive battle on Malachor produced no clear victor. Despite every assault across 5 millennia, the Jedi survived by adapting, rebuilding, and enduring. No matter how powerful the Sith became, or how devastating their attacks proved, the Jedi Order always found a way to continue. Palpatine achieved what his predecessors could not when Order 66 destroyed the Jedi Order completely. This was the culmination of 1,000 years of planning, the ultimate goal every Bainite Sith had worked toward. He accomplished the impossible goal that motivated a millennium of Bainite succession by winning the war that every previous Sith had lost. Then, he destroyed the future by failing to ensure anyone could continue what he built. When Vader killed Palpatine, the Rule of Two worked exactly as designed, yet it destroyed the tradition along with the Master. When Vader threw him down the reactor shaft on the second Death Star, no heir existed to continue the Sith lineage. Palpatine had sabotaged every potential successor. At the celebration on Endor, Luke Skywalker saw 3 Force ghosts: Obi-Wan Kenobi, Yoda, and Anakin Skywalker, redeemed and returned to the light. 3 Jedi spirits endured, while 0 Sith remained. Palpatine had promised Anakin the power to cheat death, seducing him with visions of saving Padme and promises that the dark side offered abilities the Jedi considered unnatural. He never taught the technique. The Jedi he tried to exterminate achieved immortality through the Force, while the Sith tradition he claimed to master ended in permanent extinction. Even resurrection could not save Palpatine's legacy. In Dark Empire, he returned in cloned bodies, yet still created no holocron, trained no true successor, and preserved no teachings. He achieved a form of immortality and repeated the same mistakes that led to his first death. The clones were vessels for his consciousness, not students to train. He returned from death having learned nothing and changed nothing. Momin failed to destroy a city and called it failure, then sought to improve his next creation. Palpatine succeeded in destroying the Jedi and called it victory, then made the exact same errors when given a second chance. Even the heretic whose teachings the Sith rejected understood what the Emperor never grasped. Failure teaches, but only if you learn. Sidious called the ancient Sith fools for sharing power, yet their order survived 5,000 years, while his died with him. He dismissed their entire civilization as a mistake, yet the Sith he mocked built an order that endured through empires rising and falling, through wars lost and won, and through near extinction and resurgence. Sidious ended the Sith by refusing to share power with even one worthy successor. The Sith Code, preserved for 5,000 years, concludes with a promise that through victory, chains are broken and the Force grants freedom. Victory was meant to bring liberation, but Palpatine's victory created new chains instead. He trapped Vader in a broken body designed to keep him weak, abandoned Maul when he was no longer useful, and bound himself to constant vigilance against any successor who might threaten him. The Sith Code promises freedom through the dark side, yet Palpatine used the dark side to imprison everyone, himself included. The Sith Lord who called the ancient Sith fools would be remembered by those same ancient Sith as the greatest fool of all, not because he failed to gain power, but because he failed to understand what every Sith before him knew. Power without legacy is just noise before silence. Victory without continuation is just a longer path to the same defeat. The 1,000-year lineage Bane created ended not in glorious succession, but in total extinction. And yet, for all that the ancient Sith condemned him, Palpatine's real vulnerabilities were closer to home. No Sith Lord ever succeeded in ending the Jedi. For 1,000 years, they tried through war, deception, and corruption, and every attempt failed. Then came Palpatine, and in a single generation, he accomplished what a millennium of Sith could not. As shown across the Star Wars films, he could see the future through the Force, strike down enemies without lifting a finger, and bring entire star systems under his control. By every measure, Palpatine had won. And yet, after scouring canon sources, including films, series, novels, and comics, we discovered that 5 individuals kept him in constant fear, not because they could defeat him in battle, but because they threatened the 3 things he feared most: loss of control, a broken destiny, and powers he could not dominate. These are the 5 who made the most powerful Sith Lord in history genuinely afraid. The first and oldest of these threats had watched Palpatine's rise for centuries without ever sensing the darkness hiding in plain sight. As shown in the film Revenge of the Sith, the Emperor's true weapon was not the lightsaber or Force lightning. It was breaking people from within. He found their fears and doubts, then used those weak points to defeat them mentally. This method worked on almost everyone. Jedi gave in to despair, politicians fell to ambition, and military leaders broke under pressure. Yet one Jedi proved immune to all of it, and that single exception troubled Palpatine for decades. 800 years of life had given Yoda something different, a mind completely at peace with itself. Over that long span of time, he had faced darkness before and come through it unchanged. He had survived losses that would have broken others, witnessed tragedies that would have driven lesser beings to despair, and confronted his own capacity for darkness without being consumed by it. Through it all, he kept his faith in the light side of the Force. This inner peace created a serious problem for Palpatine, because his plan to end the Jedi depended on breaking their spirits as much as defeating them in battle. Physical victory was only half the goal. The other half was making sure no Jedi ever rose again. Despite witnessing the end of everything he built, Yoda never lost faith and never gave in to despair. The film depicts Order 66 as more than just a military operation. It was designed to end hope itself. The clone soldiers who had fought beside the Jedi for years turned on them without warning, striking down masters who had trusted them with their lives. Padawans were hunted through temple halls they had called home, and the younglings, the future of the Order, were lost in a single night. Yoda felt all of it through the Force, sensing the loss of thousands of Jedi across the galaxy, and watching the Republic transform into the Empire. By all logic, this should have been enough to crush him. This meant Palpatine had failed to achieve his real goal, the complete spiritual defeat of the Jedi. In the Senate duel shown in the film, Palpatine faced Yoda at the height of his dark power. Lightning filled the air as Palpatine unleashed his rage, while Senate pods became weapons hurled through the chamber. Throughout this chaos, Palpatine kept escalating his attacks, each one designed to break Yoda's spirit through sheer display of power. However, Yoda stayed calm through every moment. He met each attack without fear, responded to each escalation without losing his center, and faced the full power of the dark side without being overwhelmed. He did not win the duel outright, since the fight ended without a clear winner, and he was eventually forced to retreat. Even so, he survived without breaking. Yoda proved that power does not equal control, and this truth haunted Palpatine for years. According to the film, the Grand Master could be driven into hiding on Dagobah, forced to live in isolation at the edge of the galaxy, but he could not be made to serve darkness or lose hope. The Jedi Order might be scattered, with its temples closed and its members gone, but the idea of the Jedi continued to exist. The possibility that new students could be trained remained open, and living proof that darkness did not have to win still breathed somewhere in the galaxy. Because of this, Palpatine knew Yoda represented something he could never fully become through Force. This was not fear of losing a fight, it was fear of being unable to finish a 1,000-year project. As long as Yoda's unbroken mind stayed connected to the Force, the work was not truly done. Some threats cannot be removed through combat, and some enemies cannot be beaten through superior power. Yoda was both, a reminder that even absolute power has limits when it meets a mind that refuses to yield. Yoda was not the only threat to Palpatine's plans, however. Another Jedi who fell long before the Empire posed an even greater danger, one that struck at the very foundation of everything Palpatine hoped to build. In the film The Phantom Menace, Qui-Gon Jinn was unlike any other Jedi on the Council. The entire Sith plan depended on turning Anakin Skywalker to the dark side. This was not one option among many, but the only path to success. Everything else, including the Clone Wars and the fall of the Senate, served this one goal. Anakin was the key, which meant anyone who could have saved him represented a serious threat to the entire Sith design. Qui-Gon was exactly that kind of threat, and his way of teaching could have changed everything. The film establishes that the Jedi Master who found Anakin on Tatooine worked differently from other Jedi. While the Council stressed rules and tradition above all else, Qui-Gon followed the living Force, a more direct and immediate connection to its energy. Because of this difference, he questioned the Council's rigid ways openly and trusted his own sense of the Force over their collective judgment. When the Council said Anakin was too old to train, Qui-Gon prepared to train the boy anyway. Similarly, when they warned about the dangers of attachment, he saw hope and potential instead. Most importantly, the film shows Qui-Gon seeking Anakin clearly for what he was from the very beginning. Not just a powerful Force-sensitive child, but the chosen one, destined to bring balance to the Force according to ancient prophecy. Under Qui-Gon, Anakin would have learned to handle his emotions, and that single change would have made Palpatine's plan impossible. The Jedi Order's approach to feelings created the very weakness Palpatine later used. Students were taught to push down their emotions and reject attachment. For Anakin, someone full of passion and desperately afraid of losing those he cared about, this created exactly the inner conflict the Sith needed. The suppression the Council demanded created shame. The shame created secrets. And the secrets created distance between Anakin and the Jedi who might have helped him. That distance gave Palpatine his opening. In contrast, Qui-Gon's view of the living Force included emotion as part of life itself, not something to be denied. He could have taught Anakin to understand his feelings without being controlled by them. With Qui-Gon as his teacher, that resentment toward the Jedi likely never forms, and Palpatine would have nothing to exploit. The danger went even further, because Qui-Gon had knowledge that could have given Anakin something Palpatine could never offer, a way to live beyond death. Over the years, the Dark Lord carefully built Anakin's inner pain by acting as the understanding authority figure the Council refused to be. When the Jedi lectured, Palpatine listened instead. When the Council dismissed Anakin's frustrations, Palpatine validated his feelings. All of this worked because Anakin felt the Jedi did not understand him. As revealed in the series The Clone Wars, Qui-Gon learned how to keep his consciousness alive within the Force after his body passed. He discovered the path to spiritual survival that the Sith had always sought but never truly found. The series shows this knowledge later passing to Obi-Wan and Yoda, helping them guide others during the dark times of the Empire. Anakin's greatest fear was losing the people he loved, and Palpatine exploited this by promising that the dark side could prevent death. But Qui-Gon could have offered something better. Not the prevention of death, but the transcendence of it. A healthy Anakin, taught by a master who understood the living Force and equipped with knowledge of the path beyond death. This version of events leaves no room for Darth Vader. Qui-Gon threatened the Sith plan before it could even start. His loss on Naboo at the hands of Darth Maul was therefore one of the most important moments in galactic history, not just because a great Jedi was gone, but because the one person who might have saved Anakin was removed entirely. Palpatine never had to face Qui-Gon directly, but the fear of what he represented was real. While Qui-Gon's loss removed one threat, the one who actually turned to the dark side brought dangers of his own, dangers that followed Palpatine for the rest of his life. As established in the films The Phantom Menace and Revenge of the Sith, one truth stands out above all others. The Chosen One was always a problem. Even after Anakin became Darth Vader, even after decades of loyal service to the Empire, and even after he seemed completely consumed by the dark side, the prophecy remained. According to the prophecy shown in the films, the Chosen One would end the Sith, not merely defeat them in battle, but end them completely and permanently. This was the will of the Force itself, a destiny woven into existence before Anakin was ever born. No amount of manipulation could erase what the Force had decreed. Palpatine could not change this destiny, so he could only try to control it, and that required constant watch. With every other threat, Palpatine could work toward elimination. But you cannot destroy destiny, and you cannot outmaneuver the will of the Force. His plan was therefore to corrupt rather than remove. If Anakin was fated to end the Sith, then Palpatine would make sure Anakin became a Sith himself. Vader would bring down every Sith except Palpatine, and as a result, Palpatine would survive alone as the last of his kind. This approach worked, to a point. With Vader's help, the Jedi fell, the Republic transformed into the Empire, and Palpatine gained supreme power. But the prophecy was not erased, only delayed. Anakin still existed somewhere within Vader, buried but not gone. Vader was therefore kept powerful but incomplete, strong enough to serve, but never strong enough to overcome his master. As shown in the comics Star Wars Darth Vader and the novel Lords of the Sith, every meeting between Emperor and apprentice carried an undertone of distrust. Palpatine tested Vader constantly, assigning impossible tasks, holding back approval, and reminding him of past failures. This was careful management of a threat to his very existence, ensuring the apprentice never grew strong enough to fulfill the prophecy. The comics reveal how Palpatine needed Vader strong enough to enforce his will across the galaxy, yet Vader could never reach his full potential. The mechanical limbs that replaced his burned flesh added to this limitation. His connection to the Force, while still vast, worked through metal that could never match his original form. Similarly, in the novel, Palpatine also cultivated Vader's psychological wounds. He fed Vader's guilt over his past actions, reminded him of his betrayal of Obi-Wan, and kept the loss of Padme alive as a wound that never healed. These injuries kept Vader focused on his failures rather than his potential for growth. Palpatine watched for any sign that Vader remembered his past because that could mean the beginning of the end. Every hint of feeling that surfaced in Vader set off alarm. The fear was always of Vader becoming whole rather than staying broken. A Vader who healed, reconnected with the light, and embraced his identity as Anakin Skywalker could fulfill the prophecy in the worst possible way. Anakin was simultaneously Palpatine's greatest tool and greatest threat, useful precisely because of the power that made him dangerous. There was also the chance that if Anakin broke free, he might finish what the prophecy started by taking Palpatine's place. Either way, Palpatine would be gone. While Palpatine spent decades managing the father, another Skywalker grew up unknown, one who would prove even more dangerous because he could not be predicted at all. As shown in the film Return of the Jedi, the throne room scene reveals Palpatine's greatest mistake. His power had always come from his ability to see the future through the dark side of the Force. This foresight let him glimpse events before they happened, giving him enormous advantages over opponents who could not see what was coming. His entire career depended on this predictive power, knowing which senators to buy, timing Order 66 at exactly the right moment, and anticipating resistance before it could organize. Luke Skywalker broke this system completely, and in doing so, he showed the basic flaw in how Palpatine understood the Force. The son of Anakin was a blind spot in Palpatine's vision. For years, the Emperor did not even know Luke existed. When he finally learned of the young man, he saw both opportunity and threat. another vessel for the Chosen One's power who could be turned or removed. But Luke did not respond to manipulation the way his father had. Where Anakin feared loss above all else, Luke had already experienced tremendous loss and come through it stronger. His aunt and uncle, his teacher Obi-Wan, and his quiet life all taken from him. Yet each loss strengthened his resolve rather than breaking his spirit. Similarly, where Anakin craved validation from authority figures, Luke was content to follow his own sense of right and wrong. Yet Luke refused the entire setup, and in that moment, he broke everything Palpatine believed about power. The film depicts the confrontation on the second Death Star with careful detail. Palpatine had set up every part of that meeting, the rebel fleet trapped, Luke's friends in danger, and the only way to save them appearing to be striking down the Emperor. The trap was elegant. If Luke refused to fight, his friends would be lost. But if Luke fought in anger, he would fall to darkness. But Luke found a third option. He threw away his lightsaber, not from weakness, but from understanding. He recognized that the choice itself was the trap. The only way to truly win was to refuse to play. In doing so, Luke showed the dark side is not destiny. This made no sense to a Sith because their philosophy assumes beings act in self-interest, fear drives choices, and power proves its own rightness. These beliefs had worked for Palpatine his entire life. However, Luke proved these beliefs incomplete. A person could choose love over fear, give up victory over principle, and reject offered power while becoming stronger through the rejection itself. As the novelization Return of the Jedi expands, Palpatine had no answer to this. His Force lightning could hurt Luke's body, but could not change his mind. His foresight showed a future where his own beliefs no longer applied, a future he could not manipulate because it operated by rules he did not understand. While the Skywalkers threatened Palpatine from within Force traditions he understood, one final threat came from a completely different place, a power that worked outside the Sith system entirely. The series The Clone Wars introduces a figure who challenged everything the Sith believed about their own position in the galaxy. The Sith had always assumed they were the ultimate masters of the dark side, and their entire tradition was built on this belief. The rule of two, the centuries of hidden work, and the careful gathering of knowledge all assumed Sith teaching represented the one true path to dark side mastery. This belief was central to Palpatine's identity and his claim to rule. Mother Talzin proved this belief wrong, and in doing so, threatened something more important than Palpatine's life. She threatened his right to rule. The series depicts the leader of the Night Sisters of Dathomir using a completely different system. Her power came from magic passed down through generations of witches who had never heard of Darth Bane or the Rule of Two. Through this tradition, she controlled the dark side without Sith training and wielded abilities without following Sith rules. The series shows Night Sister magic working outside both Jedi and Sith understanding. Rituals that reached across vast distances, spirit manipulation, and techniques Palpatine did not fully grasp. Her power was real, demonstrable, and completely separate from everything Palpatine represented. For these reasons, Palpatine treated Talzin as a threat to the entire system, one he had to handle personally. According to the series, Talzin could attack Palpatine spiritually. She could harm him without ending his life. This concerned the Emperor in ways normal threats never would. Physical threats he understood and could defend against, but Talzin worked on a completely different level entirely. This distinction is significant. Most enemies receive standard responses. A surviving Jedi might be hunted by Inquisitors. A rebel cell might face military action. These were tactical problems delegated to subordinates. Talzin, however, was different because she challenged his claim to be the supreme master of darkness. These questions are at the foundation of everything he had built. His claim to power rested on being the pinnacle of Sith achievement. Talzin's existence suggested that claim might be hollow. In the end, Talzin proved the galaxy held powers Palpatine could never claim to master. As a result, Palpatine personally arranged her removal. This departure from his usual methods shows how seriously he took the threat. Normally, he preferred to corrupt enemies into servants or remove them through proxies. With Talzin, that approach would not work. She was too independent, too powerful, and too rooted in a tradition he could not corrupt. As depicted in the comic Darth Maul, Son of Dathomir, the only solution was complete removal of the Night Sister threat. The comic shows Palpatine pursuing this goal with resources he rarely devoted to any single target. The Night Sisters were gone not because they opposed the Empire politically or militarily. Rather, they were removed because they proved the Emperor was not what he claimed to be, the singular master of all darkness in the galaxy. Some threats challenge power directly, but Talzin challenged legitimacy itself, and that made her unacceptable. She was the last of the five, but in many ways, she represented the same problem as the others. 5 figures, 5 distinct fears, and 5 weak points in the most powerful Sith Lord the galaxy had ever seen. Each of these 5 threats required different handling and different responses. But despite their differences, all of them shared one essential quality that set them apart from every other opponent Palpatine ever faced. Those fears never left him, and they shaped every hour of every day he spent in power. Emperor Palpatine's daily life was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, because even the most routine moments of his day were shaped by darkness, control, and an unending hunger for power. While the Galactic Empire spread fear across a million worlds under his rule, Palpatine himself operated on a schedule that blended political manipulation with secret Sith practices. Every hour was carefully orchestrated to maintain his iron grip on the galaxy. At dawn on Coruscant, deep within his fortified Imperial Palace, the Emperor was already awake and at work, preparing to bend the galaxy to his will once again. But what did that day actually look like? From his first waking moments to the depths of night, Palpatine's routine reveals the true nature of the man who ruled the Empire. No Star Wars source provides Palpatine's exact daily schedule, but Canon and Legends both document his Sith rituals, governing methods, intelligence networks, and secret experiments in detail. Using these sources, we can reconstruct what a typical day in the Emperor's life likely looked like. Around 4:30 a.m., long before the sun rose over the Imperial Center, the Emperor made his way alone to the depths of the Imperial Palace. While his advisors slept and stormtroopers patrolled the streets below, these early hours belonged entirely to him. A time when the galaxy's most powerful ruler indulged in rituals that no other living being was permitted to witness. In canon, this palace sat atop the ruins of the Jedi Temple, a calculated choice that Palpatine made after the fall of the Republic. Beneath the structure lay a hidden Sith sanctum known as the Shrine in the Depths. The ancient Jedi had purposely constructed their temple over this dark-side nexus in an attempt to neutralize its corrupting energy. They largely succeeded in suppressing its power, though a hidden portion of the shrine remained active deep below, a secret Palpatine would later exploit for his own purposes. After transforming the temple into his imperial palace, he claimed this ancient shrine for himself and used it as the starting point of each day. Here, surrounded by ancient Sith artifacts and absolute silence, the Emperor spent the early hours in deep meditation, connecting with dark side powers that no ordinary person could withstand. He let the dark side of the Force flow through him like a current, drawing strength from its corrupting energy and seeking visions of the future. According to the novel Tarkin by James Luceno, Palpatine believed that through intense focus on this shrine, he could eventually unlock the power to reshape reality itself. This was not idle mysticism or mere superstition. It was the core of his ambition, the foundation upon which all his other schemes were built. The galaxy's most powerful man started each day not with meetings or messages, but with rituals that would unsettle anyone who witnessed them. Both Canon and Legends agree that Palpatine spent long periods in complete seclusion during these morning hours, sometimes disappearing for days at a time while meditating and studying forbidden lore. His trusted lieutenants understood that during these periods, the Emperor was not to be disturbed under any circumstances. Those who violated this rule rarely made the same mistake twice, if they survived at all. In Legends, these sessions also served a secondary purpose, compiling all Sith teachings into what he called his masterwork, a comprehensive body of knowledge that would serve as his ultimate legacy. During these early hours, he studied ancient secrets that few others could comprehend, all in pursuit of conquering the one enemy he could not defeat through politics alone. He researched lost Jedi wisdom to find weaknesses in any remaining practitioners, studied the secret rituals of past Sith orders for techniques forgotten for thousands of years, and pored over holocrons containing the recorded wisdom of ancient Sith Lords. Whether in canon or legends, the message was the same. Palpatine's morning routine was dominated by Sith obsession and the relentless pursuit of dark side mastery. While other rulers might exercise or review briefings over breakfast, the Emperor immersed himself in darkness. By 7 a.m., having drawn sufficient power from these rituals, the Emperor emerged from his shrine to begin the mundane business of ruling an empire. And even then, a part of his mind remained focused on the greater mysteries he sought to unravel. By approximately 9:30 a.m., Palpatine shifted focus to the political machine he had built over decades of careful planning. The Empire did not run itself, and although the Emperor preferred to remain in the shadows whenever possible, he still needed to guide its direction and ensure his subordinates remained on the proper course. In Tarkin, Palpatine addressed governance by meeting with his inner circle of Imperial advisors and officials. His Grand Vizier, Mace Windu, oversaw the daily bureaucracy of the Empire while Palpatine immersed himself in darker pursuits. Windu had served alongside Palpatine since the days of the Republic, and he understood his master's preferences better than almost anyone. He filtered information, managed schedules, and ensured that only the most pressing matters reached the Emperor's attention. These high-level meetings took place in the Emperor's throne room high atop the Imperial Palace, a chamber designed not for comfort, but for intimidation. The space was vast and dimly lit, with the Emperor's throne positioned on a raised platform that forced visitors to look up at him. During the early years of the Empire, Palpatine still convened a puppet Imperial Senate, largely to placate public opinion and maintain a facade of democracy. Senators debated and voted on legislation, never realizing that their decisions had already been predetermined by the Emperor's will. This arrangement served Palpatine's purposes well, giving the citizenry an illusion of representation while allowing him to rule unchallenged behind the scenes. One notable example of Palpatine's governing style comes from the novel Tarkin, which describes a meeting between the Emperor and Governor Wilhuff Tarkin. Palpatine listened calmly as Tarkin advocated for ruthless measures against resistant star systems, using overwhelming military force and appointing regional governors called Moffs to enforce order in distant sectors. The Emperor did not argue or debate these proposals. He simply approved what aligned with his vision and dismissed what did not, his quiet voice carrying absolute finality. Palpatine never needed to raise his voice in these meetings. Everyone in the room understood that his soft-spoken directives carried the weight of absolute authority, and that crossing him meant certain doom. This approach defined how Palpatine managed the Empire throughout his reign. He encouraged ambition and ruthlessness in his subordinates, then gave their proposals his blessing when they suited his goals. Day-to-day operations, however, rarely required his direct involvement. He delegated extensively, trusting his advisors to handle routine matters while he focused on the grander schemes that truly interested him. Only once the first Death Star became operational did Palpatine dissolve the Senate entirely, handing direct control to his regional governors, a move that completed his shift to absolute rule. With the Death Star's planet-destroying capability as his enforcement mechanism, he no longer needed the pretense of democratic governance. In Legends, The political structure was similar, but with key differences in personnel. Sate Pestage served as Grand Vizier, running the Empire's day-to-day affairs and handling most routine matters of governance. Unlike in canon, where Masameda holds this influential position, legends place Pestage at the top of the administrative hierarchy, with Ameda playing a less prominent role. These men had served Palpatine for decades and understood their roles perfectly. They existed to serve, never to question or advise unless specifically asked. His advisors learned to interpret his moods carefully, reading meaning in every gesture and inflection. A single disapproving glance could end careers or lives. This arrangement allowed the Emperor to distance himself from mundane governance while still exerting total control over major decisions. Those who pleased him might receive generous rewards, but those who failed him would face terrible consequences. The Imperial Sourcebook describes meetings where Palpatine would listen to reports with an expression of mild disinterest, offer vague remarks that his advisors struggled to interpret, and then dismiss the council without explanation. His subordinates were left to guess at his intentions and implement policies they hoped aligned with his vision. This uncertainty was purposeful. It kept everyone off balance and ensured that no one ever felt secure enough to plot against him. Presumably at 12 p.m., while Palpatine rarely appeared in public, preferring to rule from the shadows of his palace, his influence extended into every corner of the galaxy. The Emperor maintained an elaborate network of spies, informants, and enforcers whose reports flowed directly to him through multiple overlapping channels. Nothing of significance happened anywhere in his empire without Palpatine eventually learning of it. In Star Wars Rebels and Andor, the Imperial Security Bureau served as the Empire's secret police, rooting out dissent and monitoring potential threats with ruthless efficiency. ISB agents operated on nearly every Imperial world, blending into local populations and filing reports that eventually made their way to the Emperor's attention. The Emperor was kept regularly informed of galactic events through summaries from the ISB and his advisors, staying aware of uprisings, criminal organizations, political rivals, and any other developments that might affect his rule. But the ISB was only one part of Palpatine's surveillance apparatus. He also deployed far darker agents to hunt his most formidable enemies. The Inquisitors, dark-side agents trained by Darth Vader at Palpatine's command, pursued hidden Jedi like Kanan Jarrus and others who had survived Order 66. Each Inquisitor was a former Jedi who had been broken and turned to the dark side, making them uniquely suited to hunting their former comrades. While most Jedi were hunted down in the years following the Purge, a few remarkable individuals managed to evade detection for decades. Grandmaster Yoda survived in exile on Dagobah until the Battle of Endor, remaining hidden and undetected throughout the Imperial era. In Legends, sources like Heir to the Empire explain that Yoda chose a dwelling near Dagobah's dark-side nexus specifically to cloak his Force signature from Palpatine, though no canon source explicitly confirms this detail. Obi-Wan Kenobi remained hidden on Tatooine for nearly 2 decades, living as a hermit and watching over young Luke Skywalker from afar. These exceptions only proved how thorough Palpatine's hunt had become, and how remarkable it was that anyone escaped at all. Through the ISB and the Inquisitors, Palpatine ensured that no threat went unnoticed for long. His web of control stretched across the entire galaxy. In the early years of Imperial rule, Palpatine's forces crushed isolated uprisings before they could spread or inspire others. When a planet resisted, the response was swift and overwhelming. Imperial Star Destroyers would appear in orbit, troops would deploy to the surface, and the resistance would be stamped out with ruthless efficiency. This pattern repeated countless times across the galaxy, teaching potential rebels that defiance was futile. However, by 2 BBY, scattered rebel cells began uniting under Mon Mothma's leadership to form the Alliance to restore the Republic. Canon depicts Mon Mothma's famous holographic speech rallying the Alliance in 2 BBY, broadcast openly on the Holonet in defiance of Imperial censorship, which formally created the Rebel Alliance. This event, shown in Star Wars Rebels, represented a moment that Palpatine's agents failed to stop, marking the point when his iron grip began to crack. Despite his vast intelligence network, hope still grew into open rebellion, and the Alliance ultimately grew strong enough to challenge the Empire openly. In the Hand of Thrawn trilogy, Palpatine's intelligence apparatus was even more extensive and secretive, extending far beyond conventional spies and informants. Beyond the ISB and military intelligence, the Emperor employed a group of elite agents known as the Emperor's Hands, Force-sensitive operatives who answered only to him. These agents operated completely outside the normal chain of command, taking orders directly from Palpatine and reporting to no one else. The most famous of these operatives in Legends was Mara Jade, who served Palpatine faithfully for years before his downfall. Mara possessed a direct mental connection to the Emperor, allowing him to communicate with her across vast distances and guide her actions in real time. This bond made her an incredibly effective agent, capable of carrying out missions that would have been impossible for ordinary operatives. The Emperor's Hands answered only to Palpatine himself, operating in complete secrecy. They could be sent anywhere at any time to neutralize a threat before it materialized, retrieve an artifact of dark side power, or simply observe and report on individuals the Emperor found interesting. Thanks to this network, combined with conventional intelligence, Palpatine often knew about dangers before they fully emerged. Whether it was a traitorous governor planning a coup, a rumor of rebellion on a distant world, or a Jedi who had escaped Order 66, the Emperor's network would identify them. He would then dispatch agents or fleets to neutralize the problem quietly. Most threats were dealt with before they ever became public knowledge. For Palpatine, a typical day involved these unseen battles waged across the galaxy. Information flowed in from thousands of sources, and orders flowed out in response. The web of control never stopped working, and neither did the Emperor. Likely around 3 p.m., beyond politics and security, Palpatine also maintained an imperial court, a sphere of close advisors, officials, and dignitaries who surrounded him in the palace. When he chose to appear before them, these moments were carefully staged to reinforce his power and remind everyone present of their place in his hierarchy. In Return of the Jedi and Star Wars Rebels, the Emperor rarely showed himself to the galaxy at large. He preferred to rule from the shadows, issuing commands through intermediaries and allowing his reputation to precede him. But when he did address a gathering or receive a visitor in person, the event was steeped in formality and fear. Every detail was orchestrated to maximize the psychological impact on those fortunate or unfortunate enough to be granted an audience. Palpatine often spoke in a soft voice during these appearances, yet everyone listening understood that tremendous wrath lurked behind those polite words. He seemed almost frail, choosing his words carefully and forcing courtiers to lean in just to hear him. The quiet tone was deliberate. It projected supreme confidence and kept everyone off balance, never quite certain whether they were in favor or moments away from ruin. When an imperial officer or supplicant brought news, they typically knelt before the throne and chose their words with extreme care. Every syllable was weighed, every gesture considered. A calm nod from Palpatine could signal high favor and rapid advancement through the imperial ranks, but a curl of his lip or a flash of his yellowed eyes sent fear through the ranks. No one in his court wanted to disappoint him, because disappointment could mean demotion, disgrace, imprisonment, or far worse. Elite royal guards in crimson robes flanked the throne at all times, silent sentinels whose presence underscored the Emperor's untouchable status. Even Darth Vader stood respectfully at his master's side during these sessions, silent and still like a black armored sentinel. The sight of the towering Sith Lord deferring to the robed Emperor reinforced the hierarchy of dread that Palpatine had constructed. If Vader, the most feared being in the galaxy next to Palpatine himself, showed such deference, what chance did ordinary mortals have? In the Empire Betrayal comics, Palpatine's court was a place of constant intrigue and peril, where a single misstep could prove disastrous. Advisors competed for his favor while secretly fearing his displeasure, forming alliances and betraying each other in a constant struggle for ambition and survival. The Emperor encouraged this atmosphere, believing that fear and rivalry made his subordinates easier to control and less likely to unite against him. A member of the court who faltered might suddenly find the Emperor's attention fixed upon them, and that attention could prove disastrous. On one occasion, an Imperial officer's attempted coup only reinforced the court's fear when Palpatine survived an attempt on his life and disposed of all conspirators by the next day. Stories like this spread throughout the court, reinforcing the atmosphere of dread that surrounded Palpatine and ensuring that even the most ambitious courtiers thought twice before plotting against their master. Sometimes in the early evening, Palpatine's attention often turned to his apprentice, Darth Vader. The dynamic between master and apprentice defined the Empire's inner workings, and their interactions formed a constant undercurrent throughout each day. This was not merely a working relationship, it was the core of Sith tradition. In canon, Palpatine communicated with Vader regularly, whether face-to-face in the throne room or via hologram across the vast distances of space. These conversations followed a consistent pattern. Vader would kneel before his master's image, and Palpatine would issue his instructions with calm authority. The formality never wavered, even after decades of service. The Emperor entrusted Vader with matters of enormous importance, yet he never forgot that an apprentice might one day covet the master's throne. During the Galactic Civil War, Palpatine contacted his apprentice to inform him of a new threat: Luke Skywalker, the young rebel pilot who had destroyed the first Death Star. The Emperor's raspy voice conveyed both urgency and dominance as he ordered Vader to hunt down the boy who could destroy us. Luke must not be allowed to become a Jedi, Palpatine insisted. This command revealed something crucial about the Sith relationship. Palpatine trusted Vader to carry out his will, but the Rule of Two ensured this tension was built into their very existence. Palpatine made clear to all Imperial officers that Vader spoke with the Emperor's own voice. A command from Lord Vader was as good as a command from Palpatine himself. This elevated Vader above every other subordinate in the Empire and ensured that military personnel obeyed him without question. Those who challenged Vader's authority quickly discovered the consequences of such defiance. Yet the Emperor also kept secrets from Vader and maintained psychological control over him through careful manipulation, constantly reminding his apprentice that he was replaceable. He reminded Vader of past failures, questioned his commitment, and occasionally hinted that a replacement could be found if Vader proved unworthy of his position. Indeed, shortly after the Death Star's demise, the Emperor secretly commissioned Dr. Cyclo to create enhanced cybernetic warriors as potential replacements for Vader, a harsh reminder depicted in Marvel's Darth Vader comics that Vader's position depended solely on Palpatine's favor. This constant pressure kept the apprentice in a state of anxiety and dependency, never quite secure in his master's approval. In Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader, the dynamic between master and apprentice was explored in even greater detail. Palpatine saw Vader as both a powerful enforcer and a constant disappointment, a shadow of what he might have become. The injuries Vader sustained on Mustafar had diminished his potential in the Force, and Palpatine never let him forget this limitation. The suit that kept Vader alive also served as a constant reminder of his failure and his dependence on the Emperor's technology. The Emperor quietly allowed rivals to rise around Vader, from Grand Admiral Thrawn in the military to his own group of dark-side adepts, as if to remind Vader that he was not irreplaceable. These rivals served multiple purposes. They provided Palpatine with alternative instruments of power, and they kept Vader motivated to prove his continued worth. The Rule of Two, the ancient Sith tradition established by Darth Vader that allowed only 2 Sith Lords at any time, meant that eventually either Vader would overthrow Palpatine or Palpatine would find a stronger apprentice. This was the way of the Sith, the strong rising to replace the weak in an endless cycle of conflict and ambition. Palpatine certainly planned for the latter possibility with characteristic thoroughness. he became keenly interested in Luke Skywalker long before their encounter on the second Death Star, and Vader understood this threat clearly. The Emperor would have gladly welcomed Luke as a new apprentice if the young Skywalker fell to the dark side, and that meant Vader's position was never truly secure. Every day, he served at his master's pleasure, knowing that replacement was always possible. Despite this constant tension, Vader carried out his master's orders with relentless efficiency. He had no choice. The alternative was doom. Palpatine praised him just enough to maintain motivation, while reminding him of weaknesses to keep him humble. The master and apprentice rarely interacted without some psychological game at play, each probing the other for weakness while maintaining the facade of loyal service. Late into the night, perhaps at 11 p.m., Emperor Palpatine did not simply retire to rest like ordinary beings. For a Sith Lord of his power and ambition, the evening hours offered opportunities that daylight could not provide. While the galaxy slept, Palpatine pursued his darkest ambitions in the solitude of his private chambers. In Star Wars Rebels, Palpatine often withdrew again to his private quarters or the Sith shrine beneath the palace for late-night contemplations. In the darkness, surrounded by artifacts of dark-side power, he reflected on the day's events, victories achieved, threats neutralized, schemes advanced, and looked into the Force for glimpses of the future, seeking glimpses of what was to come. The Emperor's sleep was brief, if he slept at all. The dark side sustained him in ways that defied normal biology. Instead of resting, he spent hours studying arcane texts or communing with the dark side for visions of the future. On some days, his pursuits were more concrete, commissioning expeditions to Jedi ruins or Sith artifacts. For example, late in the Imperial era, he sought ancient portals like the secrets of the Lothal Temple and its world between worlds, as depicted in Star Wars Rebels. His ambitions stretched far beyond the present day or even the current century. As he looked out over Coruscant, he was already planning tomorrow's operations and the next century's conquests. Palpatine understood that ruling the galaxy was not enough. He needed to ensure his rule would never end, that his power would extend beyond the limitations of a single mortal lifetime. Throughout the Imperial era, the Emperor secretly pursued experiments to conquer the one enemy that threatened every living being: mortality itself. In these solitary hours, he pushed the boundaries of nature, drawing on Sith texts and obscure sciences in hopes of achieving eternal life. His laboratories hidden across the galaxy conducted research that would have shocked even his most loyal subordinates. The Aftermath trilogy by Chuck Wendig revealed that Palpatine had developed grand contingency plans for his own potential demise, preparations that extended far beyond normal succession planning. These included Operation Cinder, a protocol to punish the galaxy if he fell, devastating loyal and rebellious worlds alike in a final act of spite. He also established secret laboratories on the hidden world of Exegol, where Sith acolytes and scientists worked to ensure his designs would continue even after his apparent demise. Additionally, he seeded hidden observatories on worlds like Jakku, storing dark-side lore and charting routes through the unknown regions that would eventually guide his return, as revealed in the Aftermath novels. During one meditation session, around 3 ABY, Palpatine sensed a distant disturbance in the Force, the emergence of Luke Skywalker as a powerful presence. This young rebel, strong in the Force, represented both a threat and an opportunity. The Emperor immediately began devising new schemes for turning or neutralizing this threat, demonstrating that even at day's end, he was setting future plots in motion. In Legends, Palpatine's nighttime routine was perhaps the most unsettling aspect of his existence, practices so terrible that even Vader was not permitted to witness them. According to the Book of Sith and Dark Empire sourcebook, Palpatine spent many late nights authoring his Dark Side Compendium, an encyclopedic collection of Sith knowledge and philosophy that represented his life's scholarly work. Using holocrons and ancient artifacts as his only light source, he wrote volumes with titles like the Book of Anger and the Weakness of Inferiors, recording his hatred and insights on permaglass sheets for future Sith to study. This work was intended to serve as his ultimate legacy, a guide for those who would follow in his footsteps. In secure laboratories hidden throughout the galaxy, Palpatine also conducted experiments that would have shocked even his closest advisors, research into the very nature of life and mortality itself. These projects included secret research into cloning and essence transfer, the ability to move consciousness from one body to another. His goal was immortality through any means possible, regardless of the cost in lives or resources. If his body failed, he intended to simply occupy a new one, continuing his reign indefinitely. Advisors and guards knew to leave the Emperor undisturbed during these hours, and those assigned to his personal security learned quickly that curiosity was a grave mistake. His final activities of each day might include dark-side rituals, attempts to contact ancient Sith spirits, or moments of intense focus where he glimpsed possible futures through the Force, adjusting his plans accordingly. For Palpatine, the end of the day was not a time for rest or reflection in any ordinary sense. It was an opportunity to advance his quest for ultimate knowledge and everlasting power, the twin goals that had driven him since his youth on Naboo, and which would continue to drive him until his final defeat at Endor. A day in the life of Emperor Palpatine was unlike anything else in the galaxy. From dawn meditations in his Sith shrine to late-night experiments pursuing immortality, he shaped every moment around his insatiable ambition. He manipulated advisors, monitored threats through his inquisitors and intelligence networks, dominated his apprentice through psychological manipulation, and projected an image of absolute authority to all who came before him. All while the empire he had created continued grinding forward under its own momentum. In the depths of night, as billions of beings across the galaxy slept under Imperial rule, the Emperor's work continued without pause. While others dreamed of freedom or simply survival, Palpatine schemed and plotted, pushing further into the dark side of the Force. For him, one day's triumph was simply preparation for the next. He had made the entire galaxy serve his will, and yet he still wanted more. Always more. But even the most carefully controlled day had one threat he couldn't plan around. There's only one Jedi in the entire Order who could realistically defeat Emperor Palpatine in a straight fight, and the truth about why reveals something far bigger about what separates tactical brilliance from raw power in the Star Wars universe. Drawing from 3 canon sources, including Star Wars Episode III Revenge of the Sith and the Clone Wars Character Encyclopedia Join the Battle, alongside 5 Legends works such as Shatterpoint and Jedi vs. Sith The Essential Guide to the Force, we break down why his lightsaber form, Shatterpoint awareness, and mindset explain how a single Jedi Council member achieved what even Yoda and Anakin Skywalker could not. The first reason is his lightsaber form that feeds on an enemy's dark side energy. Every Jedi learns lightsaber combat through specific forms, each with different philosophies and techniques. Form 1 focuses on basic strikes, Form 3 emphasizes defense, and Form 5 balances power and control. But there's one form that most Jedi avoid entirely, and the few who approach it do so with extreme caution. Form 7 remains the most aggressive, most dangerous lightsaber form in existence. However, Mace Windu did not stop at learning Form 7. The Revenge of the Sith novelization reveals he went even further and developed his own variant, which he called Vapad. Ultimate Star Wars notes Mace Windu's fighting style incorporated combat techniques that sometimes tread dangerously close to dark side practices. He was regarded as one of the best lightsaber fighters in the entire Jedi Order, specifically because he mastered something the other Jedi feared. In Legends, this gets much more specific. Jedi vs. Sith The Essential Guide to the Force explains Form 7 is called Juyo, and it's described as the most difficult and demanding of all forms. Only high-level masters trained in multiple forms could even attempt it. This was because Juyo drew on a deeper well of emotion than any other fighting style. Its unpredictable, rapid attacks were designed to overwhelm opponents through pure aggressive intensity. Most Jedi try to block out the dark side. They center themselves in the light, maintain emotional control, and fight defensively to avoid drawing on anger or aggression. That is the traditional Jedi approach, and it works against most opponents. But against a Sith Lord, someone who embodies the dark side, who channels pure hatred and rage as a weapon, that defensive approach has a problem. You fight against the current, while Vapad does the opposite. The same novel explains that using Vapad requires a Jedi to accept the enemy's furious speed. Instead of resisting it, the Jedi draws the opponent's rage and power into their inner center, then releases it back outward. In this process, the Jedi becomes half of what the book calls a superconducting loop. The other half of the loop is the dark side itself. Imagine Palpatine channeling his hatred, rage, and raw Sith power into every strike. Against a normal Jedi, that level of darkness would be a clear advantage. Against Vapad, however, that power flows through Windu and is reflected straight back at him. The harder Palpatine attacks, the stronger Windu becomes, as the circuit completes itself. Jedi vs. Sith, the essential guide to the Force, confirms this makes Vapad the perfect counter to someone like Palpatine. But there's a cost to walking this line between light and dark. Labyrinth of Evil describes Vapad as a technique of dark flirtation that very few Jedi have the discipline to control. The book notes that while many Jedi Masters understood the necessity of pushing boundaries in warfare, very few possess the inner discipline required. Mace Windu was one of the only Jedi self-composed enough to walk that line without falling. The Shatterpoint novel reveals that Mace developed Vapad to answer his own inner darkness. He had to learn to channel his own potential for violence, his own capacity for aggression, and transform it into a weapon of the light. The novel explains that to use Vapad, he must give himself over to the thrill of battle, enjoying the fight, and the satisfaction of winning. That kind of mindset is exactly what the Jedi Code warns against, but Mace found a way to use it without being consumed by it. That's why he's the only living master of Vapad in the entire galaxy. Jedi vs. Sith, the essential guide to the Force, confirms he was one of only 2 confirmed practitioners of Form 7 at all. And his specific variant was so personal, so tied to his own internal balance, that it couldn't be safely taught to most other Jedi. But having the perfect weapon against a Sith Lord means nothing if you can't see where to aim it. And that's where Mace possessed something even rarer than his mastery of Vapad. Reason number 2 is the vision that sees where everything breaks. A rare Force ability called Shatterpoint Awareness. This gift meant he could see the structural weak points in situations, the precise fault lines where one decisive strike can shift everything. In Legends, this concept gets fully developed into something that explains how Mace could see even what Yoda could not. The Shatterpoint novel provides Mace's own description of his gift. He sees the world as shot through with flaws and fault lines of possibility. When he looks at something through the Force, whether it's a person, an object, or an entire war, he can find the shear planes that will cause them to break in useful ways. The novel shows that when Mace looks at a battlefield, he doesn't just see tactics. He sees which soldier, which moment, which decision will collapse the entire enemy position. The text identifies Palpatine early as a critical Shatterpoint, a figure on whom the future of the Republic, perhaps the entire galaxy, depends. Mace doesn't know yet that Palpatine is Darth Sidious, but he senses that everything revolves around the Chancellor in ways that aren't natural, that don't feel right in the Force. During the duel itself, Mace's mind is working on multiple levels. While his body fights, his consciousness slides along the circuit of dark power, searching. The text describes him feeling for Palpatine's Shatterpoint, the absolute weakness hidden beneath all that Sith power. In the novel, Mace discovers Palpatine's Shatterpoint, described as the absolute Shatterpoint of the Sith, the fracture at the heart of the dark side itself. And that weakness comes down to one staggering realization. Palpatine trusts Anakin Skywalker. The entire Sith plan, 1,000 years of revenge and manipulation, depends on Anakin's loyalty. That trust is the crack in Palpatine's armor. But Shatterpoint doesn't just show you the weakness. The Shatterpoint novel makes it clear that it shows you the exact moment when that weakness can be exploited. These moments are described as ephemeral, appearing for a bare instant. You either strike then, or you lose the opportunity forever. When Mace walks into the Chancellor's office with 3 other Jedi Masters, he's not just attempting an arrest. In his perception, this confrontation is the shatter point of the entire Clone War. If he breaks Palpatine here, the Sith's plan collapses, the war ends, and the Republic survives. With absolute certainty through the Force, Mace understands that this single moment in the room will decide the fate of trillions. That is what Shatterpoint awareness truly means, and in canon, Mace is the only Jedi of his era who possesses this gift at that level. Yoda sees the future as clouded by the dark side, while Obi-Wan treats the Force as a guide rather than a map. Anakin holds immense power but lacks clarity. Mace, by contrast, sees the breaking point, and once you see where something will break, you cannot unsee it or hesitate, because that moment of weakness will not wait while you debate, consult, or search for another path. This is why Mace's approach to the duel is so different from how other Jedi would handle it. He's not going into that office hoping for a peaceful resolution. He's not preparing to take a prisoner for trial. He's walking into the shatter point of galactic history, and he knows with Force-enhanced certainty that if he doesn't strike true, the moment will pass and the Sith will win. But seeing the weak point isn't enough. You have to be willing to strike it, and that required something even rarer than Force gifts or lightsaber mastery. It required a mindset that pushed Mace Windu into a place no other Jedi was willing to go. The third reason is mindset, which other Jedi couldn't match, starting with Yoda, the Grand Master and spiritual leader of the Order, the wisest Jedi in centuries. The Star Wars Episode III Revenge of the Sith junior novelization shows that Yoda eventually fights Palpatine in the Senate chamber, and he admits afterward that he failed. Not because he lacked power, but because his entire approach to the Force was rooted in an older time. The novel describes Yoda recognizing that the new Sith couldn't be destroyed with a lightsaber, that they couldn't be burned away by any torch of the Force. He lost before he started because his philosophy couldn't adapt to what Palpatine had become. As depicted in the film, when he confronts Sidious in the Senate, the symbolism is overwhelming. Palpatine throws Senate pods at him, literally weaponizing the Republic itself. Yoda is fighting in Palpatine's political throne room, surrounded by the institution Palpatine has already corrupted. Obi-Wan Kenobi is consistently portrayed as cautious in Labyrinth of Evil, and his fighting style, Seresu, or Form 3, reflects that restraint with its strong focus on defense. That approach is his greatest strength in most situations, but against Palpatine, that defensive mindset becomes a fatal weakness. More importantly, Obi-Wan is fundamentally compassionate. The Revenge of the Sith shows that when he fights Vader on Mustafar, he refuses to deliver a killing blow even when he has the chance. The novel describes his heart as shattered, broken by betrayal. He tells Vader, tells Anakin, that he was like a brother. That attachment means Obi-Wan could never walk into Palpatine's office with the intent to execute him. Anakin commands raw potential power greater than any Jedi before him, but the junior novelization makes clear that by the time of the office scene, Anakin is completely emotionally compromised. He's desperate to save Padme from the death he saw in his visions. Palpatine has spent years grooming him, feeding his fears, positioning himself as the only one who can offer the power Anakin needs. A fair fight between Anakin and Palpatine never happens because Palpatine made sure it wouldn't. This is where his ruthless mindset separates him from every other Jedi. Labyrinth of Evil records Mace explicitly stating that the Jedi's deference to Palpatine has to end. While other council members are still debating political implications, still worried about the optics of moving against the Supreme Chancellor, Mace sees the situation with absolute clarity. The Sith Lord must be rooted out and eliminated. The junior novelization confirms that when Mace walks into that office, he tells Palpatine he's under arrest. But the moment Palpatine ignites his lightsaber and kills 3 Jedi Masters in seconds, something shifts. When Anakin arrives and finds Mace standing over the defeated Sith Lord, Mace tells him plainly that Palpatine has too much control over the Senate and the courts, that he is too dangerous to be kept alive. This is the voice of someone shaped by war, who has learned that some threats cannot be safely handled by laws or ideals alone. The Shatterpoint novel provides context for why Mace thinks this way. It describes his cultural background. He's Corran, and the Corran people follow 4 pillars: honor, duty, family, and herd. The herd, the community, the greater good, is the highest pillar. Yoda observes that for Mace, the Republic is his herd, and if the well-being of that herd requires the sacrifice of your personal honor, you do it. That is the key difference. Yoda would not compromise his principles. Obi-Wan, not his compassion. Anakin, not his desires. Mace Windu would sacrifice anything, including his own soul, if it meant saving the Republic. After the Battle of Geonosis, Mace reflects on his choice to spare Count Dooku while standing on the balcony. He feels deep regret, wondering whether ending Dooku's life then might have prevented the war. It's a rare instance of a Jedi Master questioning the value of mercy in hindsight, and it highlights a mindset that feels distinct from how Yoda or Obi-Wan typically approach such decisions. Jedi vs. Sith: The Essential Guide to the Force records Jedi instructor Sindralig taught that when facing a Sith Lord, a Jedi should not hesitate to use any combat technique necessary to kill them, because Sith Lords who are allowed to survive will always find a way to turn the situation to their advantage. Mace Windu internalized that lesson in a way no other council member did. Labyrinth of Evil contrasts the Jedi's general approach by noting they're obsessed with bringing enemies to justice instead of merely administering justice themselves. But Mace breaks that pattern. He's willing to be judge, jury, and executioner when the situation demands it. Palpatine's greatest weapon is emotional manipulation. He plays on Anakin's fear, provokes Yoda into a symbolic battle in the Senate chamber, and positions himself as a helpless old man persecuted by religious zealots. But as shown in the Revenge of the Sith novelization, when Mace stands over Palpatine with his lightsaber raised, ready to strike, none of that matters. Mace isn't impressed by political power. He doesn't care about Palpatine's public image and is immune to emotional manipulation because he has already made his decision based on cold strategic necessity. The text describes Mace's mindset clearly. He knows the duel is decided and prepares to kill Palpatine. That ruthless clarity, that absolute conviction that this is the moment and this is what must be done, is something only Mace Windu possessed among all Jedi. So when the duel finally begins, Mace isn't just another Jedi attempting an arrest. He's a weapon specifically designed to kill a Sith Lord at the exact moment it matters most. He has the style, the perception, and the mindset to do what no one else can. The confrontation in Palpatine's office proves everything we've discussed. Ultimate Star Wars confirms Mace Windu selects 3 other Jedi Masters to accompany him: Ajan Kolar, Kit Fisto, and Saesee Tiin. When they arrive, Mace announces they're placing Palpatine under arrest, and as shown in the film and the novelization, Palpatine's response is immediate and devastating. He reveals a hidden lightsaber and springs into action. The same source confirms he kills all 3 accompanying Jedi Masters in seconds. The new essential chronology describes them as crumpled on the floor almost before anyone can react. This opening blitz serves a critical purpose in understanding Mace's achievement. Palpatine's speed is described in the novelization as barely visible, a blur of motion and red light. His power is overwhelming, and 3 experienced, skilled Jedi Masters, all Council-level warriors, lasted less than 5 seconds. That alone shows just how dangerous Sidious is in a straight duel, yet Mace does not die. The novelization reveals that after that initial onslaught, the duel shifts. Gradually, it becomes more balanced, and Mace begins to push Palpatine back. Vapad is central to this moment, as the novel frames the fight from Mace's perspective and explains how he draws in Palpatine's fury and sends it back through the form, much like deflecting a blaster bolt. As the fight continues, they crash through the window area, fighting across the ledge, and eventually, Mace drives Palpatine onto the window edge and disarms him. The Sith Lord's lightsaber is gone. Palpatine is on the floor, and Mace is standing over him, blade close to his throat. This is the image that defines the entire fight. Ultimate Star Wars notes that Mace seemingly was winning against Palpatine. The text describes the Sith Lord as physically defeated in the duel, needing help to survive. The question everyone asks is whether Palpatine staged his defeat or whether Mace Windu truly beat him. The novelization is clear that Mace wins the lightsaber duel. It describes victory flooding through him, with no doubt and no trick. In pure blade combat, Mace overwhelms Palpatine, disarms him, and stands in a winning position. There is no hint that Mace is being fooled during the fight itself. By the rules of a lightsaber duel, Mace Windu wins. Both the film and the novelization agree on this point. What happens next is where Palpatine takes control again. The moment Anakin arrives, Palpatine changes tactics. He stops fighting like a warrior and starts acting like a victim. He uses Force lightning, lets it reflect back through Vapad, and allows himself to look weak and ancient. The novelization and junior novelization describe his voice turning frail as he begs for mercy. This is a performance meant for Anakin, and it works. Anakin sees a Jedi about to kill an unarmed man without trial. Mace, however, does not waver. He states that Palpatine controls the courts and the Senate and is too dangerous to live. Then he raises his blade, proving that while Palpatine plays for Anakin, Mace is focused only on ending the Sith Lord for good. That's the moment Anakin betrays him. The New Essential Chronology records Anakin panics, believing the knowledge to save Padme will die with Palpatine. He does not fight Mace in a fair duel, and instead cuts off his sword hand from behind, a completely cheap shot. The moment Mace loses his weapon and his arm, Palpatine's weakness vanishes. The novelization describes him instantly flipping back to full power, blasting Mace out the window with sustained Force lightning, while shouting about unlimited power. In a straight duel, Palpatine cannot put Mace Windu down. He needs Anakin to do it for him. The most powerful Sith Lord in galactic history, someone who manipulated the entire Republic and orchestrated a galaxy-wide war, cannot defeat this one Jedi in honest combat. To fully understand why Mace is unique, we need to see why the other two most powerful Jedi of the era failed where he succeeded. The junior novelization shows Yoda confronting Darth Sidious in the Senate chamber after the Jedi Temple massacre, and despite being equal to Palpatine in raw force power, Yoda loses. He admits his failure comes from arrogance and from being locked into an older way of thinking. The novel explains that the new Sith cannot be defeated with a lightsaber alone. Palpatine has changed the game by turning the Republic itself into a weapon. This is made clear in the film when they fight in the Senate chamber and Palpatine hurls Senate pods at Yoda, using democracy as a weapon. The New Essential Chronology confirms that Yoda cannot defeat the most powerful Sith Lord in history and is forced into exile. And the Revenge of the Sith novelization shows why. Yoda fights with restraint and moral limits, searching for the right and proper way to restore balance. Those traits make him a great Jedi, but against Palpatine, who has already corrupted every system Yoda believes in, they become the reason he fails. On paper, Anakin Skywalker should be unstoppable. Multiple sources describe him as having the potential to be the most powerful Force user ever, with raw ability that rivals or even surpasses Yoda. But the junior novelization makes it clear that by the time Palpatine is unmasked, Anakin is emotionally broken. He is haunted by visions of Padme dying in childbirth, and Palpatine has spent years feeding that fear while presenting himself as the only one who can prevent death through ancient Sith knowledge. Anakin has no doubt that Palpatine is the Sith Lord. According to the novel and the New Essential Chronology, he panics when he sees Mace about to kill Palpatine, fearing that the one chance to save Padme will die with him. That is why he betrays Mace, not out of loyalty to the Sith, but out of desperation and fear. Palpatine never allows a fair confrontation with a stable Anakin. His plan depends on keeping Anakin emotionally dependent and psychologically compromised, a pattern that continues even after Anakin becomes Darth Vader, as the novelization confirms Vader knows he can never truly challenge the Emperor's power. Mace Windu was the only Jedi who had both the power and the clarity to do what needed to be done. As established in Jedi vs. Sith, The Essential Guide to the Force, Mace could use Vaapad to channel darkness without being consumed. The Shatterpoint novel confirms he could see the exact weak point where one strike would collapse the enemy's entire position. And the Revenge of the Sith novelization shows that he had the ruthless pragmatism to recognize that some threats cannot be imprisoned or redeemed and can only be eliminated. That's why he's the only Jedi who actually beat Palpatine in a straight fight. And that's exactly why Palpatine had to make sure that even when Mace won, he still lost. Mace Windu was able to defeat Palpatine because of a rare combination no other Jedi possessed. His lightsaber form, Vaapad, turned the Sith Lord's greatest strength, his dark side power, into a liability, creating what Revenge of the Sith and Legends sources like Jedi vs. Sith, The Essential Guide to the Force, described as a superconducting loop that fed Palpatine's rage back at him. Every strike Sidious made only strengthened Mace, a balance no other Jedi could maintain without falling. On top of that, Shatterpoint gave Mace the ability to see exactly where events would break, a power detailed in the Shatterpoint novel, and the Clone Wars character encyclopedia joined the battle. He recognized Palpatine as the central weakness holding the entire war together and knew the precise moment decisive action was required. Finally, sources like Labyrinth of Evil and the novelization show that Mace had the ruthless clarity to accept that some threats could not be redeemed or contained. In a straight fight, with no hesitation and no illusions, Canon and Legends present one clear answer to who could beat Palpatine in combat: Mace Windu. That kind of power wasn't inherited, it was taken, in a single night, from the one man who saw it coming. When Palpatine finally ended his Sith Master, he did far more than commit a single act of betrayal. On that night in 32 BBY, the future Emperor overthrew 1,000 years of Sith beliefs while using the methods he would later use against the Jedi, and completing a ritual change that would reshape the galaxy forever. Drawing from both canon and legend sources, 6 critical actions took place when Darth Sidious turned against Darth Plagueis, and each one reveals something important about the man who would become Emperor. First, he lured his master into a false celebration and slowly weakened his defenses throughout the evening. The timing of this action was no accident and carried deep meaning for the Sith tradition that stretched back 1,000 years. James Luceno's novel, Darth Plagueis, reveals that the attack took place on the night before Palpatine was elected Supreme Chancellor of the Galactic Republic. This was 32 BBY, and the political crisis on Naboo had been created specifically to push the Senator into the highest political office in the galaxy. The Sith had started a war and tragedy across the entire planet to create this moment, and now 2 rises to power would occur within hours of each other. One would be public and celebrated across the Republic, while the other remained hidden in darkness. Yet the setting itself created a dark meaning for what was about to unfold. Plagueis had chosen his fancy penthouse apartment in the Kaldani Spires residential apartment building on Coruscant for their celebration of the coming victory. The building towered above the surrounding cityscape, and the penthouse offered views of the Senate district where Palpatine would be crowned Chancellor by morning. The dwelling belonged to Higo Damask, which was the public entity Plagueis had built as a moon banker and financial power broker over many decades of careful work. This penthouse stood for everything the Sith Lord had built through patient scheming, including his wealth and political network, and a carefully built empire of influence. The relationships with senators and corporate leaders, and the invisible threads connecting the banking clan to 1,000 other groups would all belong to someone else before morning. Sidious gave Plagueis Celestin wine throughout the evening, and as the night wore on, the Sith Master became more and more drunk, and his defenses began to weaken. Meanwhile, the apprentice practiced the words of his public victory while planning his private one. Sidious practiced his acceptance speech for the chancellorship many times, while Plagueis listened and offered his thoughts on how to address the Senate. He refined the phrases and adjusted the tone because he wanted every word perfect for the moment when the Senate would recognize him as its leader. All the while, he was planning the private victory that would come first. The guard of Plagueis lowered, and his awareness dulled because he trusted his apprentice completely after decades of working together toward this moment. They had schemed side by side against the Jedi, the Republic, and the galaxy itself, and the Moon believed they shared a bond that went beyond the traditional Sith relationship of suspicion and certain betrayal. This trust would prove to be his deadly mistake, because the dark side had already chosen his replacement. Eventually, Plagueis fell asleep, and the dark side of the Force called to the Senator of Naboo to take his place as the ruling Sith Lord. Second, he attacked with deadly accuracy the moment his master fell asleep. Sidious targeted the specific weakness that would make fighting back impossible. The moment had arrived after years of patient waiting and careful planning. He struck with powerful force lightning that destroyed the breathing device Plagueis had been forced to wear since surviving a Maladian attempt on his life in 52 BBY. Without the breathing device working properly, the Moon began to suffocate while his apprentice watched, and what followed was darkly ironic in ways that would echo through Sith history for generations to come. The Sith Lord, who had given his existence to beating the end of life, who had spent decades studying midichlorian control and the secrets of living forever, now choked on his last breaths while his apprentice watched. Palpatine struck him with force lightning and choked every last bit of air out of his master. He continued his attack until he was certain Plagueis had passed, because there would be no recovery, no trick, and no survival this time. The method itself was important and revealed much about the future Emperor's character and his approach to removing obstacles. There was no warning, no trial, and no fight between equals. The attack came while Plagueis slept, striking him when he was most open and showing how Sidious would later ambush the Jedi. Even in victory, Sidious hesitated and feared his mentor might have outsmarted him because of his knowledge of life and what came after. The answer involves a cruel irony that speaks to the nature of the dark side itself. The Legends novel shows that the Force had basically abandoned Plagueis due to his experiments with the midichlorians and his desire to bend the will of the Force by making life last longer. His scientific approach to the dark side had created a distance between himself and the very power he sought to master through research. Plagueis also suffered from physical limits that came with his injuries. The Maladian attackers who had come after him 20 years earlier had left him needing the breathing device that Sidious destroyed with his opening strike. Even if Plagueis had woken in time, his body was weakened in ways that would have made fighting back difficult against a prepared and ruthless attacker. Third, he delivered a crushing speech that revealed his true feelings about their entire relationship. As the Moon lay struggling for breath, Sidious spoke words that exposed decades of hidden anger and planned manipulation. He called his master a useless old fool and recounted their entire history together with brutal honesty. It was Higo Damask as Darth Plagueis who came to Naboo to exploit the planet's plasma and set the Trade Federation up as its overseers. It was Plagueis who set his sights on a seemingly confused young man and, with careful skill, pushed him into ending his father, mother, and siblings. The apprentice continued his verbal attack without mercy because it was Plagueis who took him as an apprentice, sharing some knowledge but keeping the most powerful secrets and denying him his wishes as a way to control him while filling him with deadly rage and turning him to the dark side. It was the master who criticized the early efforts of his apprentice and who once choked him to show who was stronger. Whether these accusations were entirely true or merely excuses, they revealed how Sidious saw every part of their relationship as control that he now returned in kind. Yet even in this moment of betrayal, Sidious recognized his master's role in his rise. Even all that the Moon had taught him might not have been enough to take the final steps to the chancellorship without help in controlling the Senate and bringing into play various allies across the galaxy. Plagueis had used his identity as Higo Damask to open doors that the senator from Naboo could never have opened alone. The banking clan, the Trade Federation, and corporate leaders across dozens of systems all came from connections the Master had grown over decades. Sidious admitted he could not have succeeded without his Master, and this admission revealed the truth about their entire relationship. Sidious had taken knowledge, resources, and political power first, and drained everything useful from his Master before throwing him away. The partnership had always been temporary from one side at least, because Plagueis saw a partner, while Sidious saw a stepping stone to greater power. Sidious saw the openness of Plagueis as a weakness and used it throughout their entire relationship. In his speech, he accused the Moon of sharing some knowledge, but keeping the most powerful secrets, and claimed his Master had denied him his wishes as a way to control him. Fourth, he openly rejected the vision of Plagueis for shared rule and restored the traditional Sith path. This action was not simply about power, because it was about beliefs and the future of the Sith Order itself. Plagueis had spent decades trying to reshape what it meant to be Sith, and Sidious rejected every part of that vision in a single night of violence. The Secrets of the Sith explains that Plagueis taught his apprentice that 2 Sith were required for their dangerous schemes. If they worked together following the Rule of 2 by Darth Bane, they would succeed in controlling the full power of the dark side and rule forever for 10,000 years. The Darth Plagueis novel describes how the Moon promised to break the cycle of betrayal entirely and create something new in Sith history. Although the training would be hard, the Master assured his apprentice that they would be free of the Rule of 2 and its requirement that one must fall for the other to rise. They would neither keep any secrets from each other, nor feel any jealousy or distrust in their relationship. They would serve the dark side together as equals in power and purpose, and partnership would replace fear in this new vision of what the Sith could become. However, Plagueis went even further by attempting something rarely achieved in Force history. Inspired by the doctrine of the Dyad, he tried to create a powerful bond with Sidious that would have been a unique Force bond as strong as life itself. Such a connection would make betrayal impossible because their fates would be linked together forever. However, Plagueis was unable to form the Dyad despite his great power, and his failure convinced Sidious that his Master was not worthy of the task. The difference between Master and apprentice was basic and impossible to bridge from the very beginning. Plagueis wanted to live forever because he believed the secret lay in science and wanted to escape the Rule of 2 through eternal life. If both Sith Lords lived forever, neither needed to pass for the other to advance. Sidious chose a different path entirely because he embraced replacement, and he betrayed and destroyed his Sith Master to train his own Sith apprentice, Darth Maul, because the Rule of 2 limited their ranks to 2 Sith Lords at any given time. In his speech, Sidious openly rejected the shared rule model with words that revealed his true nature, declaring that now that they had won the race, he did not need a partner, because the presence of his Master and unnecessary advice would only confuse matters. The words were meant to hurt, because the apprentice was not just ending his Master, but rejecting the entire way of thinking. He had never planned to share power, and had only pretended to accept the vision while planning to restore the traditional Sith path. One Sith believed the future meant ending the cycle of betrayal forever, while the other believed the cycle was the point. Plagueis wanted change, but Sidious wanted tradition, and tradition won that night in the penthouse above Coruscant. Fifth, he completed the ritual change as the dark side proclaimed his reign through a tremor that shook Coruscant. The doubt Sidious experienced passed quickly, and in its place came a dramatic shift in the Force that the new Sith Master experienced as a moment where the dark side would control him as much as he would control it. Then a tremor took hold of Coruscant itself, as if the planet recognized what had just occurred in that penthouse. Sprung from this act, the dark side released itself in a powerful wave across the planet, and at the center of the quake stood Sidious alone with the body of his former master. A rush of voices from near and far, and from present and ages past filled his thoughts, and those voices proclaimed his reign and cheered the start of a new order that would reshape the galaxy. Following the tradition of the Sith Order, the apprentice had completed his dark side training by ending his master through the path Darth Bane had set up 1,000 years before. Each generation of Sith proved its worth by beating and destroying the previous one in an endless cycle of replacement. Around the same time as his election to Supreme Chancellor, Sidious betrayed and took the life of Plagueis and claimed the role of Sith Master for himself. Political and Sith changes aligned perfectly as one identity ended and another began. The Empire existed in form before it existed in name because Sidious had taken over the financial empire of Plagueis through Damask Holdings, and all the setup of imperial power was already in place, while the announcement would come later. Remarkably, this mirrored what happened to the Master of Plagueis years before. The Legends novel shows that when Darth Plagueis took the life of Darth Tenebrous, the Force called out to him in a similarly uncertain way that the moment had come and he should claim his stake to the dark side. Tenebrous had been a Bith Sith Lord who focused on building things, including starships, weapons, and plans that stretched across decades. He had trained Plagueis in the ways of the dark side while doing his own secret experiments in midichlorian control. When Plagueis struck him down in a collapsed mineshaft, Tenebrous believed his mind would survive through his research. But he was wrong, and his apprentice took everything he had built. The same call that raised Plagueis now raised Sidious as the dark side spoke to one generation of the Sith and then spoke the same words to the next. But the novel makes an important point about choice that defines the Sith path. The Force only advised because it neither controlled actions nor guided hands, and that was the doing of Sidious alone, because the dark side whispered opportunity when the apprentice chose to seize it. The responsibility belonged to Sidious, and not to some mystical command. His final words to the dying Plagueis made his plans clear beyond any doubt or question. He promised that he would be proclaimed emperor and that the Sith would have their revenge, and he would rule the galaxy. This was not pride or empty boasting, but prophecy and a statement of absolute certainty about events already set in motion through decades of careful planning. Sixth, he took everything his master had built and immediately set the grand plan into motion. With Plagueis gone, Sidious did not just gain the title of Master, but acquired major assets, as canon sources confirm. He took over 11-4D, the late Sith Lord's many-limbed assistant droid, along with the studies of Plagueis, including deep research into the biological foundations of life and midichlorian control. These studies contained decades of experiments and observations that Plagueis had gathered in his quest to beat mortality. Sidious would later use this research in his own experiments, including the creation of clone bodies on Exegol, and he took control of Damask Holdings and its vast financial network. Every asset Plagueis had built over decades now belonged to Sidious alone, and the secret replacement was already in place and had been for years without the Moon ever suspecting the depth of the betrayal. Legends lore establishes that Sidious had trained Darth Maul without the full knowledge or approval of Plagueis, which was a direct breaking of the understanding between master and apprentice. The rule of two meant exactly two Sith Lords, and by training Maul in secret, Sidious had created a third while breaking the very tradition that Plagueis sought to escape. Sidious had planned his betrayal from the beginning, because Maul would do what the risk of discovery might not allow Sidious to do himself, and the apprentice had always planned to beat and replace his master. With cold precision, Sidious then outlined his plans to the dying Plagueis. He had Maul perform tasks while he executed the rest of the grand plan that included growing an army in secret, starting rebellion across the galaxy, making up intergalactic war between fake factions, and surrounding the Jedi while catching them unaware. The methods he described would later become the Clone Wars, Order 66, and the Jedi would occupy the same position of trust and blindness that Plagueis had occupied. As Chancellor of the Republic and Dark Lord of the Sith, Palpatine would start the terrible Clone Wars 10 years after the Naboo crisis. Legend sources reveal that he himself headed both the Galactic Republic and, secretly, the Confederacy of Independent Systems. Victory and defeat were equally meaningless when one person controlled all the pieces, and in the wake of the Naboo crisis, the Galactic Senate voted to elect Palpatine as Supreme Chancellor because the crisis had been created by the Sith specifically to push him into the highest political office in the Republic. Chancellor Valorum had been ruined through the control of trade disputes and government failures that the Sith had planned behind the scenes. Now the office would have an unseen second occupant in the Dark Lord of the Sith, and the Republic had elected its future destroyer without ever knowing the true nature of the man they had chosen. The pattern would repeat throughout the reign of Sidious, as apprentices became tools to be used and replaced when no longer useful, and the only difference was that Plagueis learned it first and learned it last. When a tool broke or became unnecessary, another took its place without pause, and Sidious showed this lesson painfully to Count Dooku by ordering his end at the hands of Anakin Skywalker. Later, he made sure Darth Vader understood the same system. Apprentices were never equals, never fully trusted, and always tools to be shaped, tested, and replaced. From Plagueis, Sidious learned that closeness invited betrayal, so he kept Vader isolated, uncertain, and hungry for approval, offering praise rarely and punishment frequently. Knowledge and power were held back on purpose, secrets kept to ensure he remained needed, and fear was his constant tool for control. Every apprentice learned that their role was never a partnership, but usefulness, and their ambitions were always less important than his plans. This lesson shaped decades of the rule of Sidious, ensuring that no one ever felt safe enough to challenge him, and that his apprentices remained nothing more than tools in his endless pursuit of power. The central irony of the demise of Plagueis is stated directly in canon sources that describe what made it a tragedy. He could not save himself from his end despite being able to save others because he had gained power over life and could influence the midichlorians to create life and prevent others from passing. Yet when his own moment came, all that knowledge meant nothing, and the tale ended by saying that Plagueis became so powerful that the only thing he was afraid of was losing his power, which he did. The fear became prophecy. In truth, the Empire was born on that night, even though the galaxy would not learn of it for over a decade. With Plagueis gone, Sidious was now the sole Dark Lord of the Sith, and legend sources confirm that no rival, partner, or limit remained. There was clarity now, with one Sith, one vision, and one path forward toward galactic control. The body of Plagueis was never recovered by the authorities, and no public record of his end was ever filed. Ego Damask simply vanished from galactic affairs, and his business partners assumed he had retired or moved away. The banking clan continued to operate under new leadership, never suspecting that its founder had been ended by his own apprentice. Sidious had erased his master from existence as completely as if Plagueis had never lived at all. The tremor in the force that shook Coruscant marked something the galaxy could not yet understand, and the voices from ages past proclaimed his reign and cheered the start of a new order because the Sith had worked in shadow for 1,000 years. By morning, the senator from Naboo would address the Republic as its new chancellor, but the true crowning had already happened alone in a penthouse apartment over the body of the last obstacle to absolute power. That night didn't begin in the penthouse. It began 11 years earlier on Naboo, with a moon who saw a troubled young man and recognized exactly what he could be made into. The transformation of Palpatine into Darth Sidious involved methods so calculated and thorough that they produced the galaxy's most dangerous being. Through legends and canon sources, the answer reveals an 11-year process of breaking down his mind and rebuilding him as the architect of the Empire. The story begins not with the Sith, but with a troubled family on Naboo. James Luceno's 2012 Legends novel, Darth Plagueis, introduces Palpatine as the heir to House Palpatine, one of Naboo's noble families. Born approximately 84 years before the Battle of Yavin, the young man grew up in a Lake Country estate surrounded by wealth. However, behind this elegant appearance, his childhood was marked by constant mistreatment. His father, Kosinga Palpatine, was the head of House Palpatine. He was an alcoholic and a failed politician who took out his frustrations on his family. Kosinga had tried for political office and lost. As a result, his bitterness turned him into a harsh and heartless man. The mistreatment was not just physical. Kosinga constantly told his son he was worthless and would amount to nothing. Meanwhile, Palpatine's mother remained unnamed, but her role was clear. She enabled the mistreatment and never stepped in to protect them. The young Palpatine had multiple brothers and sisters, all of whom suffered under their father's anger. Yet the mistreatment triggered something far more dangerous. He began to feel a power growing inside of him, something he could not explain or control. Palpatine was force-sensitive, though he had built walls to hide his power, perhaps since infancy. This power had been bottled up for 17 years. On Naboo, the Force was not part of everyday life. The planet had no Jedi temple and no Force traditions. For this reason, the young man kept this concealed, knowing only that something made him different, setting him apart from everyone around him. By age 17, Palpatine had reached his breaking point. He was consumed by rage at his family and his own powerlessness. He wanted them gone, and the tension between father and son had been building for years. But what happened next would shatter the family forever. Kosinga Palpatine arrived unexpectedly on Chandrila and intercepted his son during the Legislative Youth Program. Security guards removed the young Palpatine from the Naboo vessel Jafan 3 and brought him to the family starship. His mother and siblings were already aboard. After launch, Palpatine learned he was being taken to Chamal Minor to live with the Grijatis family, placed out of reach of outside influences. The pair fell into a heated argument in the communications room. Kosinga accused his son of disgracing the family, while Palpatine defended himself. As the confrontation escalated, Palpatine's rage finally exploded. In moments of pure fury, he reached out with powers he had kept hidden his entire life. Kosinga was hurled against the bulkhead, and when the injured man tried to escape, the bulkhead buckled inward, driving him to the floor. A guard entered, and Palpatine threw him across the cabin. He ended them all, his father, mother, siblings, and guards, using the Force. Just days after the tragedy, help arrived. A moon banker named Hego Damask, whom Palpatine had met during the youth program, sent his agents to assist. Damask arranged for the starship's disposal, leaving no evidence behind. Chandrilan and Naboo authorities searched but found nothing, and without evidence, there was no crime. The meeting that followed would change Palpatine forever. Plagueis secured a private cabin for Palpatine aboard the passenger ship Quantum Colossus. When they met, the young man was still shaken by what he had done. He expected support from someone he considered an ally, but instead, Plagueis challenged him. The Muun explained that he had intentionally orchestrated the confrontation. He had come to Chandrila to ensure Kosinga's spies would see them together, wanting to push father and son to a dilemma. Palpatine realized he had been manipulated. Nevertheless, Plagueis explained this was necessary. Before he could reveal certain truths, Palpatine needed to be free from fear of expressing his true nature. Then came the revelation that transformed everything. Plagueis asked if Palpatine had ever learned of the Sith. Palpatine knew little, only that they were a Jedi sect, the result of a family conflict. The Sith were far more than that, Plagueis explained. They were the prodigal offspring, destined to return and overthrow the Jedi. He described them as beings who refused to live by conventional morality, who shaped history rather than merely observing it. Plagueis revealed his true identity. He was not merely a banker, but a Sith Lord. More than that, he explained, just now there was only one Sith, unless Palpatine chose to join him. Plagueis tested Palpatine's abilities during their meetings. He taught the young man basic techniques for sensing through the Force. He showed him how to reach out and feel the living energy around him. He demonstrated powers that seemed impossible. Most importantly, he explained that everything Palpatine had experienced was the Force responding to his emotions. However, the offer that followed came with conditions that would require Palpatine to abandon everything he knew. Plagueis looked at the young nobleman and made an offer. The moon promised to teach Palpatine everything about the Force. He offered to show him how to use the power that frightened and confused him. He claimed he could transform him into something greater than any Jedi. The offer was tempting beyond measure. Palpatine had spent 17 years feeling powerless despite his family's wealth. Now, someone was offering him real power, the kind that could never be taken away. However, Plagueis made the conditions clear. Accepting this path meant leaving Naboo, abandoning his inheritance, and devoting himself completely to the dark side. With no attachment to his family's legacy and no loyalty to Naboo's traditions, he wanted power more than anything else in the galaxy. As a result, Palpatine accepted Plagueis' offer without hesitation. Months passed between their initial meetings and the next critical moment. During this time, Plagueis taught Palpatine basic Force techniques. He showed him how to hide his abilities from others. He explained the history of the Sith and their long war against the Jedi. He prepared the young man for what was coming. What came next would transform Palpatine completely. Aboard the Quantum Colossus, Plagueis made his final offer. He explained that the dark side was only for those who valued self-determination over all else that existence offered, and that joining would require abiding submission as his only road to salvation. At Plagueis' instruction, Palpatine knelt and pledged to join his destiny forever with the Order of the Sith Lords. Plagueis extended his left hand to touch him on the crown of the head, declaring the pledge complete. From that day forward, Palpatine would be known as Sidious. Yet this was only the beginning of 11 years of brutal conditioning. The training period would span from age 17 to 28. Plagueis would take his new apprentice to multiple worlds, each designed to break him and shape him through the dark side of the Force. The process would be cruel at times and painful, with denial remaining a key factor in Sith training. Every location served a purpose in building the perfect Sith apprentice. On the low-gravity planet Boyant, Plagueis taught him hunting techniques. Sidious learned to become what his master called a predatory swarm, moving silently, stalking prey without detection, and eliminating targets efficiently. He ended the lives of countless creatures during this training, and Plagueis insisted he felt no remorse as they culled the herd, sharpened their skills, and marinated themselves in dark side energy. Following this, the training on HORRIFYING involved combat against battle droids. 200 battle droids, provided by the Techno Union, were deployed against Sidious in a fabricated cityscape. He wielded the lightsaber he had built under Plagueis' guidance as the droids attacked in concentric rings, staggering their assault and triggering bursts at random. Sidious fought for hours, learning to channel his rage into precise strikes while deflecting bolts and destroying the automata one after another. On Cursed, the training revealed how completely the transformation had succeeded. The planet had been reserved for Sith use for 600 years, and indigenous primitives had come to expect the periodic return of sky visitors. Plagueis and Sidious fought against several hundred warriors armed with longbows and metal-tipped lances. They wielded force pikes rather than lightsabers to avoid senseless slaughter, moving across the plain like wraiths and felling opponent after opponent with taps from the stun weapons. When only one warrior remained standing, Plagueis tossed aside his force pike and ignited his crimson blade. He used the force to hurl the warrior to the ground, then opened the primitive's chest cavity with his lightsaber. Reaching inside, he extracted the still-beating heart and raised it overhead as a collective lament rose from the crowds watching on the hillsides. Taking a bite from the organ, Plagueis then passed it to Sidious. Raised in Naboo's refined culture with elegant manners and civilized behavior, Sidious should have recoiled. Instead, he consumed the flesh without hesitation. This marks the completion of his transformation. The refined nobleman from Naboo had become a being willing to do anything for power. During these 11 years, Sidious learned every skill a Sith needed: Force lightning, telepathy, manipulation, elimination techniques, lightsaber combat, and Force concealment. Each ability was practiced until it became natural. Plagueis demanded perfection, responding to failure with punishment and to hesitation with contempt. The training in Force lightning proved particularly significant. Plagueis warned his apprentice that to summon and use lightning properly, he would someday have to be on the receiving end of its power as a means of taking the energy inside himself. Yet combat skills alone would not bring down the Republic. Plagueis understood that true power came not from Force abilities, but from controlling the invisible systems that held civilization together. According to Sidious's own writings in the Book of Sith, Plagueis's greatest talent was manipulating what he called the strings that kept the galaxy from degenerating into chaos. Plagueis maintained contact with beings across the galaxy who shaped entire star systems, yet remained unknown to ordinary citizens. He cultivated relationships with leaders from the intergalactic banking clan, executives in the corporate alliance, viceroys in the Trade Federation, and even criminal organizations like Black Sun. These were not allies, but useful bureaucrats who could be controlled through greed, ambition, or fear. Most importantly, Plagueis taught Sidious how to view other beings. There were only two categories: those who wielded power and those who existed to serve. Everyone outside the Sith was inferior, and their only value resided in their usefulness. They owed the Sith everything, including their lives, the truth of the universe as Plagueis understood it. This philosophy restructured how Sidious experienced human connection. Where normal beings felt empathy, Sidious learned to feel contempt. Where others experienced guilt, he felt satisfaction. Where people sought genuine relationships, he saw only tools to be used and discarded. The transformation was so complete that Sidious would later write that the weak must be trained to accept their own worthlessness and punished when they failed to serve properly. Plagueis also perfected what Sidious called the art of institutional hiding. Darth Bane had hidden in the shadows, staying unknown. Plagueis went further by hiding in plain sight while wielding institutional power. He taught Sidious that the best disguise was not invisibility, but the appearance of being ordinary, trustworthy, and even weak. People wanted to believe their leaders were like them, so appearing vulnerable generated sympathy, while actual power remained concealed. The lesson would prove essential. Sidious would later spend decades as Senator and Supreme Chancellor, deceiving even Jedi Masters face-to-face without ever breaking character. He would convince Yoda to send Jedi into danger while appearing to help them. He would dismantle democracy while being praised as its greatest defender. Not once in over 30 years would anyone detect a Sith Lord hiding behind the mask of the concerned public servant. By age 28, Sidious had become everything Plagueis intended, and the galaxy would never know what was coming. Around 56 BBY, Sidious's training finally concluded. By this point, he had mastered every technique Plagueis taught him. He could fight, eliminate targets, manipulate, and deceive without hesitation. More importantly, he had learned to hide his nature completely. This concealment proved perhaps the most critical skill. Plagueis had taught Sidious techniques to hide in plain sight, to be submerged in the unified pattern to which the Jedi were attuned. He would remain visible in the Force, but not as a Sith. Hidden among ordinary life, masked by everyday routines, his true nature would be beyond detection. This ability would prove essential for what came next. In 56 BBY, a Naboo senator named Vidar Kim was eliminated on Coruscant. It turns out that Sidious arranged this. He hired Maladians, a species known for such work, through his first major recruit, Sate Pistage. The operation was clean and professional, leaving no evidence pointing back to Sidious. With Kim gone, Sidious took his place as Naboo's senator. This position suited his goals perfectly. As a senator, he had access to the Republic's political center. This position allowed him to observe the government's inner workings, identify its weaknesses, and build a network of allies and agents to eventually seize control. The transition from Sith apprentice to senator was seamless. Sidious presented himself as a dedicated public servant. He was charming, intelligent, and committed to Naboo's interests. He befriended other senators, joined committees, and worked on legislation, all while studying the Republic's weak points. Remarkably, Sidious even interacted with Jedi without being detected. Ronar Kim, the son of the eliminated senator, was a Jedi Knight. He investigated his father's death and met with Sidious multiple times, while Count Dooku and Sifo Dyas worked with him on political matters. Despite their combined expertise, none of these Jedi Masters detected the Sith Lord hiding in plain sight. However, in 52 BBY, Sidious made a decision that would complicate the rule of two. He traveled to Dathomir, a planet home to the Night Sisters, a group of Force-sensitive women who practice dark side techniques. Mother Talzin, the Night Sisters' leader, wanted a particular infant male Zabrak for her own purposes, but another Night Sister sought to save the child from that fate. Believing Sidious could protect the boy better than she could, she offered him the infant. Maul's role was never intended to be that of a true Sith apprentice. Sidious already held that position under Plagueis, and according to the rule of two, only one apprentice could exist at a time. Instead, Maul would become something different, a weapon skilled in stealth and combat, to be eliminated when no longer needed. In Legends continuity, Plagueis eventually heard of Maul but tolerated him as a Sith assassin, rather than a true successor, even providing Sidious with the stealth ship to gift to Maul. Plagueis had earlier told Sidious that they would transcend Bane's rule of two entirely, sharing all knowledge without the traditional master-apprentice betrayal cycle. The Moons saw Maul as a useful weapon, not a violation of their partnership. In canon, however, reference materials suggest Plagueis died before Sidious took Maul as his apprentice, thus preserving the rule of two strictly. With Maul's role clearly defined as that of an assassin, his training focused on combat rather than Sith philosophy. On Mustafar and later at the Orsis Academy, Sidious pushed the young Zabrak to his absolute limits using methods similar to those Plagueis had employed on him. He taught Maul to channel rage and hatred into combat effectiveness. Unfortunately, unlike his own comprehensive education under Plagueis, Sidious never taught Maul political manipulation or long-term strategy. In 42 BBY, 25 years into Sidious's apprenticeship, something unprecedented happened that would tilt the Force itself. This was the most critical event in the entire story. Plagueis and Sidious traveled to a secure location where they could meditate without interruption. They remained there for months, focused entirely on a single objective. Their goal was to influence the Force itself. For thousands of years, the Jedi had maintained balance. The light side was dominant. The dark side existed, but it was contained and controlled. Plagueis and Sidious intended to change that basic reality. They succeeded. They willed the Force to shift and tip irrevocably to the dark side. This was not just a philosophical change, it was a real change to the fabric of reality. The Force itself began favoring darkness over light. The balance that the Jedi had maintained for thousands of years started to collapse. This was not immediate. The shift happened gradually, but once it began, it could not be stopped. The Jedi would eventually sense that something was wrong. However, by the time they noticed, it would be too late to reverse the change. This event was the foundation for everything that followed: the Clone Wars, the fall of the Republic, and the rise of the Empire. The consequences appeared quickly. Immediately after this shift, Plagueis' plans began succeeding at an unprecedented rate. The election of Finis Valorum as Supreme Chancellor in 40 BBY went exactly as planned. Plagueis had been cultivating Valorum for years. Valorum was weak and easily manipulated, which made him perfect for their purposes. Plagueis had also been working with the Trade Federation. He helped them gain power and influence. He arranged favorable legislation. He removed their competitors. He made them dependent on his financial support. In turn, they became tools he could use when needed. Newt Gunray, the viceroy of the Trade Federation, owed everything to Plagueis and Sidious. However, as Sidious grew stronger, he began to see possibilities his master could not. Growing tension emerged between Plagueis and Sidious during the final years of their partnership. Plagueis was obsessed with achieving immortality through midichlorian manipulation. He spent endless hours in his laboratory on Abora, conducting experiments attempting to create life and prevent death. Sidious participated in some of these experiments. He learned the scientific approach to the Force that Plagueis favored. Nevertheless, Sidious's interests lay elsewhere. He cared more about political power than biological immortality. He understood that controlling the galaxy required controlling its institutions: the Senate, the military, the economy, and public opinion. Their different priorities created tension. Plagueis believed that mastering life and death was the ultimate goal. Sidious believed that ruling the galaxy was more important than living forever. These conflicting visions would eventually lead to the inevitable conclusion of their relationship. As seen in the 2005 film Revenge of the Sith, Sidious would eventually tell Anakin Skywalker about his master. The scene takes place at the galaxy's opera house on Coruscant. Sitting in the shadows, Palpatine shares what he calls the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise. He explains that Plagueis had such knowledge of the dark side that he could influence midichlorians to create life and keep people from dying. Matthew Stover's novelization of Revenge of the Sith expands on this conversation, revealing additional details about Plagueis' research and abilities. However, both the film and the novelization make one thing clear: Plagueis taught his apprentice everything he knew. This was his fatal mistake. The death of Plagueis occurred in 32 BBY on the night before Palpatine's election as Supreme Chancellor. Following a performance at the galaxy's opera house and a celebration dinner, the two Sith Lords retired to Plagueis' penthouse in the Kaldani Spires to prepare for the Senate vote. The moon was in high spirits, convinced that decades of planning had finally reached fruition. As the evening progressed, they opened bottle after bottle of rare Seleucid wine. Plagueis, who had trained himself to go without sleep for 20 years, allowed himself to relax in celebration of their impending victory. He drank heavily while discussing the grand plan's success, never noticing when his breathing began to slow. In that moment, the apprentice Plagueis had created destroyed him. Without warning, blue force lightning erupted from Sidious's fingertips and struck the moon's breathing device. Plagueis' eyes snapped open in shock, yet he hesitated to defend himself. He trusted Sidious completely and could not comprehend that his own apprentice would betray him. That hesitation proved fatal. As Plagueis struggled for breath, Sidious revealed the truth. The apprentice had learned all his master's secrets and no longer needed him. Every recent success Plagueis had claimed as his own had actually been Sidious's manipulation. Yinchor, Dorvala, Eriadu, the Neimoidians, Naboo, all of it had been carefully orchestrated by the apprentice while the master congratulated himself on his genius. The rule of two demanded that the apprentice eventually surpass the master, and that moment had finally arrived. Desperately, Plagueis tried to use his midichlorian manipulation to save himself, but the techniques that worked on others failed when applied to his own dying body. The irony was absolute. Plagueis had spent decades researching how to prevent death and had discovered techniques that could influence life itself. Yet in that moment, none of it mattered. He died gasping for air while his apprentice explained that he had been deceived from the very beginning. The being who had broken Palpatine and created Darth Sidious became the first victim of his own success. The next morning, Palpatine was elected Supreme Chancellor of the Galactic Republic. Days later, he traveled to Naboo to congratulate Queen Amidala on her victory over the Trade Federation. Only upon arriving in Theed did he learn that Darth Maul had been killed during the Battle of Naboo. The Zabrak had succeeded in eliminating Qui-Gon Jinn, but Obi-Wan Kenobi had defeated him in turn. The timing seemed significant, as if the dark side itself had demanded payment for Sidious's ascension. When informed of Maul's death, Sidious felt no grief. His reaction was a simple acknowledgement of an expected outcome. The tool had been destroyed, and he would acquire new tools when necessary. This was the important lesson Plagueis had taught him through decades of careful instruction. Everything and everyone was expendable except power itself. The techniques Plagueis used to forge Sidious would persist long after both Sith Lords were gone. The canon novel Shadow of the Sith by Adam Christopher reveals that Sidious continued Plagueis' work on life manipulation. After his apparent end in Return of the Jedi, his essence survived. The Sith Eternal, a cult of followers on the hidden world of Exegol, worked to resurrect him through cloning. Massive cloning facilities operated on Exegol, where cultists trained in dark side techniques attempted to create a body that could house Sidious's spirit. Many clones failed and were called rejected matter before being disposed of. One strand cast named Dathan survived but lacked force sensitivity. He eventually escaped, married a woman named Miramir, and had a daughter named Rey. The Rise of Skywalker Visual Dictionary provides additional details about the Sith Eternal's operations. The cult had been working on Exegol for a generation, maintaining ancient Sith knowledge while building a massive fleet of Star Destroyers. Each vessel was equipped with planet-destroying weapons, powered by enslaved workers and tortured kyber crystals. In the depths of Exegol's citadel, the Sith Eternal cultists chant during their rituals, repeating the name of the Moon Sith Lord over and over. Decades later, Plagueis remains spoken with reverence by those who practice his dark science. This reveals the complete success of Plagueis' methods. He did not just create one powerful Sith Lord, but a system that would outlive both of them. The techniques he taught Sidious for political manipulation became doctrine for the Sith Eternal. The life creation experiments he pioneered enabled the cloning program. The patient, long-term planning he demonstrated shaped the decades-long fleet construction. The breaking of Palpatine was so thorough that the transformation survived decades beyond invisible control through secret bases, systematic use of enslaved labor, patient planning spanning generations, and ruthless treatment of all beings as expendable tools. Even his own granddaughter, Rey, was hunted by agents like Oki of Bestoon, who received orders from Sidious's preserved consciousness while being promised Exegol as a reward. For 30 years, the Sith Eternal built civilization-ending weapons in complete secrecy, creating a system that kept working no matter what happened. The techniques Plagueis pioneered actually worked, though he never lived to perfect them. His student finished what he started. The transformation spawned cults of followers and reshaped the galaxy for generations. Everything the Sith Eternal built, from their cloning science to their patient fleet construction, reflected lessons Plagueis had taught on distant training worlds decades earlier. Even after Plagueis was gone, one problem remained that no amount of training could resolve. Emperor Palpatine's deepest hatred wasn't directed towards the Jedi as an order. The Sith Lord kept this distinction for Yoda, and its scope is more profound than simple rivalry. Examining both Canon and Legends archives, the reason for the Emperor's burning contempt reveals 7 major truths. The most striking aspect of Yoda's character was his complete resistance to manipulation. Palpatine understood desire and knew exactly how to exploit it. Anakin Skywalker craved the power to cheat death, to save the woman he loved from the visions that haunted him. Palpatine gave him that hope, and the Chosen One burned the Jedi Temple for it. Count Dooku wanted confirmation to justify his suspicions about the Republic's corruption. Darth Sidious offered him purpose and validated his doubts. Both men turned because the dark side offered something they desperately wanted. The Sith Lord's pattern of corruption repeated across generations. Find out what someone wants, become the only one who can provide it, then set the price before they can realize how much. Yet with Yoda, Palpatine faced an unexpected obstacle. In the canon film Revenge of the Sith, Darth Sidious doesn't even bother to negotiate when Yoda confronts him in the Senate chamber. He doesn't make any deals or promises of power, just immediate combat. The film's Legends novelization explores this further, revealing that the Sith Lord already knew that Yoda was beyond any manipulation. Because of this, he found no reason to waste his breath. The Legends novel Darth Plagueis demonstrates how Palpatine and his master studied the weaknesses of the Jedi Order, analyzing every vulnerability, every philosophical flaw, every point where attachment, doubt, or ambition could be twisted against them. Their grand plan took decades to execute, during which they identified which Jedi could be turned, which could be controlled, and which ones had to die. Yoda fell into the last category, not because he was the strongest, but because the Jedi Master had achieved an extraordinary level of discipline that rendered him immune to any form of seduction. The Clone Wars of canon continuity confirms this. In the episode Sacrifice, the dark side trials at Moraband reveal another dimension of Yoda's resistance. Yoda confronts not just illusions of Sith Lords, but also a manifestation of his own dark side, his own potential for corruption. The Phantom takes Yoda's form and attacks him with his own fighting style and Force abilities. What makes this trial significant is Yoda's response. He doesn't defeat his dark side through combat, but by acknowledging it exists and choosing not to let it control him. This acceptance without submission shows a spiritual superiority that Palpatine, who fully embraced his darkness, could never understand. The Sith philosophy requires surrendering to passion and power, but Yoda showed that true mastery meant recognizing temptation while remaining outside its influence. But the Jedi Master's endurance was only the first layer of what made Yoda especially dangerous. The Sith Lord who thrived in shadows faced an even more alarming problem. In reality, Yoda can read power games in an instant. It's been established that Palpatine's greatest strength was his ability to operate in plain sight. He nudged his puppets across the galactic board without them knowing they were part of his game. The Sith Lord shaped situations in a subtle way that his victims thought they were making their own choices. But Yoda was aware of the board. He just couldn't see who was moving the pieces. In the film Attack of the Clones, there's a revealing scene after the vote to create the Grand Army of the Republic. While other Jedi react with relief that the Republic now has a military to defend itself, Yoda tells Mace Windu that the shroud of the dark side has fallen, but that the future was difficult to see. The Legends novelization gives us Yoda's internal concerns. He is bothered by how perfectly everything is aligned. A clone army appearing exactly when needed was too perfect to be coincidental. Throughout the canon animated series The Clone Wars, Yoda's instincts kept pushing him toward uncomfortable truths. Along with Obi-Wan and Anakin, the ancient Jedi personally leads the investigation into Dias and the clone army's true origins. Though the trail goes cold, Yoda's instincts tell him something larger and hidden was in control. Palpatine's master recognized this danger early. In the Legends novel Darth Plagueis, the ancient Sith warns his apprentice that Yoda has survived for centuries by understanding patterns that others miss. Yoda could sense wrongness in the Force. He could feel when situations were being engineered rather than naturally developing. And when Yoda advised caution, the Council listened. For Palpatine, that was the real danger. The Sith Lord needed the Jedi to be reactive, aggressive, willing to take shortcuts to win the war. But Yoda kept pumping the brakes. He questioned the Council's expansions of power and kept reminding them that their role was to serve the Force, not the Republic's political needs. This forced Palpatine to operate within tighter margins. He could manipulate individual Jedi, could set up battles and political crises, even arrange for Jedi to die in convenient ways. Darth Sidious had neutralized other threats. Qui-Gon Jinn was killed. Dias was assassinated. Dooku turned. But Yoda forced him to work slower and take greater risks. The Jedi Master's sensitivity to the Force and his centuries of experience made him a formidable opponent. Naturally, Darth Sidious didn't want scrutiny to areas he needed to keep dark. For a Sith Lord who prided himself on perfect control, being compelled to alter his plans was unforgivable. Yoda's investigative instincts proved particularly dangerous to Palpatine during Fives' The Clone Wars storyline. When Clone Trooper Fives discovered the inhibitor chips and brought evidence to the Jedi, he nearly exposed Palpatine's entire conspiracy. Though Palpatine invented the appearance of an attack to discredit Fives, Yoda's presence on the Council meant the matter couldn't be completely dismissed. The ancient Jedi's questions about the chip's true purpose lingered, creating doubt that Palpatine had to carefully manage. While the Sith Lord successfully maintained the deception, the incident demonstrated how Yoda's probing wisdom could bring the grand plan to failure. Yoda's influence extended to the Jedi's relationship with the clone army itself. In the Clone Wars episode Ambush, Yoda is shown treating clone troopers as individuals rather than expendable resources, learning their names and emphasizing their value beyond their combat function. This perspective spread through the Jedi Order, with masters like Plo Koon and Anakin Skywalker forming genuine bonds with their troops. For Palpatine, this presented an unexpected complication. The grand plan required the Jedi to view clones as mere soldiers, making Order 66's betrayal a simple military execution. But Yoda's philosophy fostered relationships between Jedi and clones that created hesitation in some troopers during the Purge. While most clones executed their orders due to the inhibitor chips, the emotional bonds some developed with their Jedi generals caused psychological conflict that Palpatine hadn't fully anticipated. Commander Cody's visible regret after ordering fire on Obi-Wan, or Captain Rex's resistance to the chip's control, stem partly from the relational approach Yoda supported. The Sith Lord wanted disposable pieces on his board, but Yoda's insistence on dignity and individual worth introduced human variables into what should have been a perfect mechanical execution. More than that, the Emperor worked under a devastating constraint: time. He was racing against it. The Sith Lord had a mortal lifespan to contend with. Palpatine needed to destabilize the Republic, engineer a war, corrupt or kill the Jedi, and establish himself as Emperor before age caught up with him. Every year that passed without completing these goals was a year closer to failure. As Palpatine's political career advanced, his mounting frustration became evident in his decision-making. He did everything he could to accelerate events according to his timeline. Palpatine's fear of death drove him to seek Sith immortality techniques, the same knowledge he would dangle before Anakin Skywalker as the ultimate temptation. The Sith Lord's desperation manifested in increasingly reckless schemes, each intended to compress decades of careful planning into years or even months. His impatience became a weakness, forcing him to rely on backup plans that occasionally revealed his hand early. Meanwhile, Yoda had witnessed 8 centuries and remained vigorous. This basic difference in their relationships with mortality shaped every aspect of their conflict. Yoda's acceptance of the natural cycle allowed him to think in generational terms, understanding that the battle between light and dark extended far beyond any single lifetime. This perspective gave him strategic clarity that Palpatine, trapped in his mortal urgency, could never achieve. Indeed, the Jedi Master's patience extended beyond personal combat. When Qui-Gon presents young Anakin to the Council in the film The Phantom Menace, Yoda perceives danger and advises against training the boy. He doesn't demand immediate action or exile. He counsels patience and caution instead. The other Jedi, pressured by recent events and swayed by the prophecy of the Chosen One, overrule him. Yoda accepts this, waiting to see how the situation develops rather than forcing his judgment. Whenever Palpatine schemed to compel the Jedi to make hasty, compromising choices, the Jedi Master's patience interfered. This was because Yoda had trained Jedi for over 800 years. He established a legacy by transmitting the core knowledge every Jedi inherits. He trained Count Dooku, who trained Qui-Gon, who trained Obi-Wan, who trained Anakin. The master-apprentice lineage flowed through Yoda like ancient riverbeds. In canon continuity, Yoda had trained thousands of Jedi over 8 centuries, an estimated 20,000 by the time of his death. Each carried forward a philosophical framework that emphasized wisdom over power, service over ambition. This lineage created what Palpatine feared most: a self-replicating system of values that couldn't be destroyed by killing one individual. The Jedi Master's teaching methodology itself posed a unique threat to Palpatine's order. Unlike many Jedi, who focus primarily on combat training or force techniques, Yoda emphasized what he called learning to let go, the basic principle that views attachment as a lead-in to suffering. In the film The Empire Strikes Back, when training Luke, Yoda doesn't begin with lightsaber forms or force powers. He starts with failure, with lifting rocks, with facing fear in the cave. This pedagogical approach created Jedi who understood the Force philosophically before mastering it technically. Palpatine's corruption methods targeted Jedi through their attachment, Anakin's love for Padme, Dooku's frustration with the Republic, Barriss Offee's disillusionment with the war. But Yoda's students learned to identify attachment as a warning sign rather than a motivation. Even when Yoda's direct students fell, as Dooku did, they carried an understanding of what they'd lost. In Sean Stewart's Legends novel Yoda: Dark Rendezvous, Dooku admits to his former master that he still hears the ancient Jedi's lessons even decades after turning to the dark side, suggesting the corruption was never complete. This meant that even Palpatine's victories over Yoda's lineage were partial, haunted by the Jedi Master's teachings that couldn't be fully erased. This made Yoda unkillable in ways unrelated to combat ability. Eliminating him would create a rallying cry for every surviving Jedi across the galaxy. Palpatine understood fear as a tool, but he also recognized the danger of creating the wrong fear, the fear that ignites resistance rather than submission. However, allowing Yoda to live was equally impossible. In the canon film Attack of the Clones, Yoda's duel with Dooku demonstrated mastery that bordered on precognition, moving with complete unity with the Force. When Order 66 is executed in canon continuity, the clone troopers with Yoda on Kashyyyk attempt to kill him. The ancient Jedi not only senses it instantly, but he decapitates both troopers before they can cause him any damage. Palpatine's rage was enormous when he learned Yoda survived. The Sith Lord had organized the perfect Jedi purge, eliminated thousands of Jedi simultaneously, and yet, the one Jedi whose death mattered the most slipped through his fingers. For this reason, as the Legends novel Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader reveals, Palpatine became obsessed with Jedi survivors following Order 66. He sends Vader to hunt down every remaining Jedi because each survivor represents a potential for resistance. This went beyond the clutches of pride or the purpose of completing the grand plan. The Empire's legitimacy rested partly on the narrative that the Jedi were traitors who had grown corrupt and weak. At the same time, Palpatine also needed the galaxy to believe that challenging the Empire was hopeless. There was no room for the old ways in his new world because the Sith had proven themselves superior to the Jedi. But Yoda's survival contradicted all of that. This contradiction became even more obvious in how the Empire handled public information. Unlike other Jedi Council members whose deaths were documented and announced, Yoda's fate remained officially ambiguous. The Empire couldn't claim his death without proof, yet acknowledging his survival admitted defeat. In the canon novel Tarkin, it's revealed that Imperial intelligence compiled reports on potential Jedi survivors, with Yoda's status listed as unconfirmed. This forced the Empire into a defensive posture. They maintained the narrative of Jedi extinction while quietly hunting survivors, which undermined the image of absolute Imperial control. This question haunted Imperial propaganda throughout the Dark Times, creating space for hope among those who opposed Palpatine's regime. Without knowing it, Yoda cast his shadow over Palpatine's plans during the Clone Wars. The war was supposed to provide Palpatine the perfect environment to destroy the Jedi while pretending to be their ally. But Yoda's position on the Jedi Council meant that every military decision, every tactical choice, every Jedi general deployment required accounting for the ancient master's judgment. The Jedi's institutional arrogance played directly into Palpatine's hands. But Yoda stood apart from this flaw. In canon continuity's multimedia project, The High Republic, the Jedi Master had witnessed the Night of Sorrow, a devastating battle against the Path of the Open Hand cult centuries before the Clone Wars. He chose to hide knowledge of the Nameless, living weapons against Force sensitives, from the Jedi archives to protect the Order. This decision revealed Yoda's understanding that the Jedi weren't free from error, that some knowledge was too dangerous even for them. While other council members insisted the Jedi could handle any challenge, Yoda harbored no such illusions. He recognized the Order's weaknesses long before Palpatine exploited them. He simply refused to abandon Jedi principles as the solution. Palpatine's use of the Clone Wars as a psychological operation faced constant friction from Yoda's ethical framework. Yoda serves on the Jedi Council that oversees military actions. He approves Anakin's unusual measures, but the Jedi Master consistently raised questions about whether military victories justified the cost paid by clone troopers and civilian populations. This approach directly undermined Palpatine's goal of brutalizing the conflict enough to justify emergency powers. The Sith Lord needed the war to be savage and desperate, to corrupt the Jedi into making moral compromises. But Yoda kept pulling the Order back, insisting that how they won mattered as much as whether they won. This wasn't mere idealism, it was resistance to Palpatine's corruption campaign. Every time Yoda convinced the Council to choose a more ethical approach, he delayed the transformation Palpatine required for Order 66 to succeed completely. Throughout the war, Yoda also weakened Palpatine's ability to isolate and eliminate specific Jedi. Following Yoda's advice, the Jedi Council made deployment decisions collectively. This meant Palpatine couldn't just assign some troublesome Jedi to reckless, high-risk missions without arousing suspicion. He could still create dangerous situations, but Yoda's foresight meant these situations often had backup plans and support that kept Jedi alive longer than Palpatine wished. In the final months before the canon film Revenge of the Sith, Palpatine needed the Jedi scattered and vulnerable for Order 66 to work perfectly. But because of Yoda's supervision, Jedi were often deployed in pairs or groups with communication protocols and fallback positions. This didn't save most Jedi, but it helped some survive the initial purge. What Palpatine didn't know is that the Clone Wars forced Yoda into a spiritual crisis that he failed to exploit, revealing another dimension of the Jedi Master's resilience. In the final season of the canon animated series The Clone Wars, Yoda experiences Force visions showing him the future of the Jedi Order's destruction. Unlike other Jedi who might have been broken by such knowledge, Yoda sought to understand it. The arc titled Voices shows him hearing Qui-Gon Jinn's voice through the Force, leading to a journey to the Force planet where he confronts trials designed to test his deepest convictions. These trials, arranged by the priestesses of the Force, pushed Yoda beyond anything Palpatine could conceive. The Jedi Master faced his own pride, confronted manifestations of his past failures, and ultimately learned that true immortality comes not from defeating death, but from becoming one with the Force. This spiritual evolution occurred under Palpatine's nose during the height of the Clone Wars, when the Sith Lord believed he had the Jedi exactly where he wanted them. While Palpatine schemed to corrupt individual Jedi, Yoda was achieving a deeper understanding of the Force itself. The knowledge Yoda gained during these trials positioned him uniquely for the dark times ahead. Learning to commune with Qui-Gon through the Force meant the Jedi wouldn't be completely extinct even after Order 66. This Force Ghost technique, which Qui-Gon had partially mastered, would eventually be taught to Obi-Wan, and later allow both masters to guide Luke Skywalker. Palpatine's grand plan anticipated destroying the Jedi as a physical organization, but Yoda's spiritual advancement created a possibility the Sith Lord never imagined: Jedi who could persist beyond death itself. What made this particularly frustrating for Palpatine, had he known about it, was that Yoda's evolution happened through acceptance rather than resistance. The Jedi Master didn't fight against the visions of the Order's fall. He acknowledged that the future was uncertain, that the Jedi had grown arrogant, and that the catastrophe might be unavoidable. But rather than letting his knowledge lead to despair or desperate action, Yoda used it to prepare spiritually for whatever came. This acceptance represented the opposite of everything Sith philosophy taught. After Yoda vanished into exile on Dagobah, Palpatine's hatred found new expression. He couldn't kill Yoda, couldn't find him, couldn't even be certain how much danger the ancient Jedi still posed. So, he built an empire designed around the assumption that Yoda, or someone like him, might still be alive. In the Legends book, Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader, Palpatine initiated the Imperial Inquisitorius program, training dark-side users specifically to hunt Force sensitives. These Inquisitors, armed with rotating double-bladed lightsabers, scoured the galaxy for Jedi survivors and Force-sensitive children. The program represented another response to Yoda's survival. If standard forces couldn't locate the ancient master, perhaps dark-side users could sense him through the Force. The Emperor also poured resources into Sith artifacts and ancient dark-side knowledge, seeking powers that might overcome even Yoda's mastery. Projects like the excavation of ancient Sith temples and the search for wayfinders to hidden Sith strongholds consumed vast Imperial budgets. All of this stemmed from one cold fact. Palpatine ruled the galaxy, but couldn't claim total victory while one diminutive Jedi Master remained beyond his reach. The canon Darth Vader comic series shows Vader's missions hunting Jedi survivors throughout the early Empire. But conventional hunting has its limits. Jedi can use the Force to stay concealed, blending into populations and avoiding detection. The Emperor needed tools that made hiding irrelevant. If he couldn't find the Jedi, he'd destroy entire planets where they might hide. This motivation started superweapons development. The canon novel Tarkin explores the Tarkin doctrine in detail, showing how the Empire's entire philosophy centered on superweapons that could destroy planets. But this doctrine goes beyond the scope of controlling populations. It concentrates on creating a galaxy where even the most powerful Force user can't threaten Imperial authority. The Tarkin doctrine explicitly states that fear of Force, rather than Force itself, will keep systems in line. This strategy reflects Palpatine's understanding that normal tactics had failed to capture Yoda. The doctrine represented a shift from hunting single threats to creating such overwhelming terror that resistance became impossible. The Empire's commitment to superweapons continued for decades. They also executed colossal kyber crystal mining operations and developed various experimental weaponry. The scale of these projects revealed the depth of Palpatine's obsession. Beyond the Death Stars, the Empire developed the World Devastators, the Galaxy Gun, and numerous prototype superweapons detailed in Legends continuity sources. In canon, projects like Operation Cinder demonstrated Palpatine's willingness to destroy Imperial worlds themselves if they failed to meet his standards. This went far beyond logical military strategy. A typical army could enforce Imperial rule effectively, as it had for years. But this required Palpatine to trust his subordinates, to rely on governors and moffs to maintain order in their sectors. The superweapon obsession reflected something deeper, the need for power that existed independently of loyalty, strategy, or even the Force itself. Technology could be controlled absolutely in ways that people, even dark-side users, could not. A technological titan that can destroy entire worlds doesn't care about lightsabers or Force abilities. It represents power that exists outside the choices or morality of living beings. In canon continuity, the Emperor's throne room on the second Death Star reveals another aspect of the inner battle Palpatine struggled with. He surrounds himself with the ultimate technological power, protected by thousands of troops and the most powerful battle station ever built. He's not just protected from rebellion, but also from Force users who might break into normal military defenses. This overinvestment had consequences. For one thing, the cost of the Death Star could have built thousands of Star Destroyers. For another, the secrecy required to develop planet-killing weapons created gaps in security that the rebellion eventually exploited. The Empire's focus on technological terror rather than governance created the political instability that allowed rebellion to spread. Yoda remained a threat by his mere existence. Palpatine knew the Jedi Master was out there, that he might be training new students, or was quietly waiting for the right moment to strike. This uncertainty was the driving force behind creating an empire that even a Jedi as powerful as Yoda couldn't threaten. The irony is that Yoda wasn't planning some grand counterstrike. The Jedi Master's exile on Dagobah represented perhaps the most psychologically clever countermove in this long conflict with Palpatine. The Swamp World was strong with the dark side, due to a cave containing the residue of an ancient dark Jedi, as revealed in The Empire Strikes Back and expanded in various canon sources. This dark side presence served as camouflage, masking Yoda's light side signature from Palpatine's searches. But the choice of Dagobah revealed strategic thinking that went beyond mere hiding. By living in close proximity to dark side energy for nearly 2 decades, Yoda demonstrated he could endure corruption's presence without being consumed by it. More importantly, Yoda transformed his exile into a monastery of sorts, deepening his connection with the Force in ways that wouldn't have been possible in the bustling Jedi Temple. When Luke Skywalker arrived, he did not find a defeated refugee, but a master who had refined his understanding of the Force to its purest essence. Palpatine may have driven Yoda from galactic affairs, but in doing so, he accidentally gave the Jedi Master the solitude necessary to become an even more perfect expression of Jedi philosophy. In the movie Revenge of the Sith, the confrontation in the Senate chamber is one of the most symbolically loaded fights in the entire saga. The Sith Lord and the Jedi Master don't duel in the Jedi Temple or the Chancellor's office. They fight in the Senate itself, the image of the democracy Palpatine has just destroyed. Darth Sidious believes power comes from domination, from the ability to impose one's will through strength. On the other hand, Yoda believes power comes from harmony with the Force, from understanding patterns larger than individual ambition. And so, the duel wasn't about winning. It was a matter of proving which philosophy runs the galaxy. When Palpatine uses Force lightning, he's using the dark side's most distinctive power, which is the ability to harm through pure hatred and aggression. When Yoda catches that lightning and absorbs it, he demonstrates that the light side can endure what the dark side inflicts. In Legends continuity, the Revenge of the Sith comic adaptation shows additional details of their confrontation, including moments where they seem almost evenly matched despite Palpatine's raw power. The novel, also Legends, describes how Palpatine draws upon decades of Sith knowledge, channeling hatred accumulated through years of deception and manipulation. His lightning isn't only an attack, but also an expression of his philosophy that power means the ability to destroy. Yoda's response demonstrates centuries of discipline and understanding that true strength lies in resilience rather than aggression. The Senate chamber's vast space becomes their battlefield, with floating platforms representing the fragmented Republic. Each force push sends Senate pods bolting through the chamber, physical manifestations of the political chaos Palpatine has directed. The architecture itself bears witness to their conflict, with every collision marking the death of democratic ideals. But the fight didn't end the way Palpatine imagined. Ultimately, Yoda retreats, and the duel ends without a clear victor. This denied the Emperor the symbolic victory he needed. More than wanting Yoda dead, he wanted the Jedi Master broken, defeated, and proven inferior. It would have demonstrated to the entire galaxy that the Sith philosophy of power through domination was superior to the Jedi philosophy of power through harmony. The battle was about whether the galaxy would be ruled by fear or hope, by domination or balance. Palpatine won the immediate political victory, becoming Emperor and hunting Jedi to near extinction. But Yoda won the philosophical victory by proving the Jedi way could produce someone even the most powerful Sith Lord couldn't corrupt or destroy. For the next 2 decades, Palpatine ruled through the Death Star, through Vader, through countless Star Destroyers and Stormtroopers. He imposed his will on the galaxy through overwhelming force. But somewhere on Dagobah, Yoda lived in a swamp, teaching one student the old Jedi ways. The Emperor commanded billions, but the Jedi Master taught one boy about trusting in something larger than himself. When Luke Skywalker confronts the Emperor in the canon film Return of the Jedi, he rejects the dark side despite every incentive to embrace it. He throws away his lightsaber and declares himself a Jedi, like his father before him. This moment physically represents Yoda's philosophy, and it's this philosophy that ultimately defeats Palpatine when Vader chooses redemption over the dark side. The hatred Palpatine felt for Yoda wasn't just personal. It was the hatred of someone whose entire worldview was challenged by another person's existence. The Emperor lived under the belief that the dark side was stronger, that the Sith understanding of power was correct. Superiority and fear were the true nature of the galaxy. Yoda was the symbol that contradicts these convictions. The Jedi Master was everything Darth Sidious could never be: content and at peace. Palpatine's hatred itself proved Yoda right, because it showed that the dark side could never truly defeat the light. It can only fight endlessly against it. That same need for control extended to the one person he kept closest, and it cost that person everything. The most powerful Sith Lord in the galaxy ended up with an apprentice who never reached his full potential, yet few ever question why. Most people see Darth Vader's suit as a tool of survival, a tragic necessity after Mustafar. But that assumption misses the deeper reality of what the suit represented. Across canon, legends, and even George Lucas's own commentary, Darth Vader was not the final form of Anakin Skywalker. He was what remained after unimaginable damage, physically, mentally, and spiritually. And that broken state wasn't just tragic, it was useful. It made Vader dependent, predictable, and ultimately far less likely to become the kind of Sith who could truly overthrow the Emperor. To understand why that mattered, we need to go back 1,000 years to a Sith Lord who reshaped everything. Darth Bane established the Rule of Two about 1,000 years before the rise of the Empire. The Rule of Two originates from the Darth Bane novel trilogy by Drew Karpyshyn, later incorporated into canon through the Clone Wars animated series and other materials. It stated that only two Sith should exist at any time: a master to embody power and an apprentice to crave it. But this rule was never about harmony. Most people overlook what the Rule of Two actually implies. The Sith didn't build their philosophy around cooperation. Their teachings center on domination, survival, and the idea that power belongs to whoever can take it. Bane didn't create the Rule of Two to give the Sith balance. He created it to stop them from destroying themselves before they could destroy their enemies. The old Sith orders had already proven what happened when too many Dark Lords existed at once. Bane's solution came from watching the collapse of those ancient orders. When too many Sith Lords existed at once, their ambition turned inward. Rivalries became wars. Betrayal became constant. The Sith wasted their strength fighting each other instead of conquering the galaxy. So, Bane designed the Rule of Two to concentrate that ambition into a single line of succession. One master, one apprentice, operating in secrecy, building power over generations. Palpatine had already proven he understood this doctrine because he lived it. He had ended the life of Darth Plagueis, his own master, through betrayal. The details of Plagueis' demise come from James Luceno's novel Darth Plagueis in 2012. In canon, Palpatine only references this event in Revenge of the Sith without elaboration. In Revenge of the Sith, Palpatine tells Anakin that Plagueis' apprentice struck him down in his sleep. That's the Sith way. Power is taken, not inherited. And even if Palpatine enjoyed absolute control, he knew the Rule of Two came with an inevitable consequence. An apprentice who attains sufficient power will eventually challenge his master. However, this reality posed a serious problem. Anakin Skywalker was no ordinary apprentice. He was the chosen one. Before his disfigurement on Mustafar, Anakin Skywalker represented the single greatest long-term threat to Palpatine's reign. His potential wasn't merely impressive, it was unprecedented. His midichlorian count measured at over 20,000, so high that even Master Yoda couldn't match it. That alone placed Anakin in a category of raw force potential beyond any Jedi the galaxy had seen in generations. But the most important part isn't just that Anakin was powerful, it's what he could have become. According to George Lucas himself, Anakin was meant to become so powerful that he could have been twice as good as the Emperor. It means that in the Star Wars mythos as Lucas envisioned it, the fully realized Anakin Skywalker wasn't simply a top-tier Jedi. He was the ultimate Force user of his era, someone who could have surpassed Palpatine by a massive margin. And the Emperor knew it because he had been watching Anakin for years. Palpatine had seen glimpses of what was coming. He watched Anakin tear through Separatist forces during the Clone Wars. He witnessed the young Jedi defeat Count Dooku, a master duelist with decades of training and a Sith Lord's experience. Anakin's growth wasn't gradual, it was explosive. He was accelerating towards something that even Palpatine couldn't fully control. When Obi-Wan defeated Anakin on Mustafar and left him burning, it wasn't just the destruction of a body, it was the collapse of a future. In those final moments, even as Anakin burned, Palpatine must have felt two emotions at once: relief and loss. Relief, because the being who could have surpassed him had been physically broken. Loss, because the ultimate weapon he had shaped was damaged before reaching its peak. From that moment forward, Darth Vader was never going to be what Anakin could have been. When Palpatine's medical teams rebuilt Anakin Skywalker into Darth Vader, they weren't restoring a Jedi Knight. They were keeping a ruined body alive. The suit became the difference between survival and death. It replaced destroyed lungs, sealed burned flesh, and compensated for limbs that were gone forever. Vader was no longer a warrior wearing armor, but rather a warrior trapped inside life support. The armor weighed him down, its systems invading his body. His breathing no longer came from his lungs, but from machines. The mask was not merely a tool of intimidation, but was a necessity. The body within was ruined, and the suit was the only thing that allowed him to move. But what made the suit so terrifying is that it did more than keep Vader alive. It made him a prisoner. Vader's existence became a cycle. Constant pain, constant strain, constant limitation. Even the Legends sources describe the experience of being Vader as relentless suffering. The injuries never healed, which meant they were managed while the pain never faded. As a result, it became permanent. Vader's body wasn't restored, it was stabilized, and stabilization is not the same as freedom. That suffering mattered because it reshaped Vader into something different from Anakin Skywalker. Anakin had been fast, athletic, and expressive. He fought with agility and confidence. Vader, on the other hand, fought like a machine, brutal, direct, efficient. His style evolved because it had to. The suit's weight and his injuries forced him into a new form of combat, one that relied on strength, pressure, and overwhelming force. And even then, Vader was still terrifying. His cybernetics gave him power, but his potential, the ceiling of what he could have become, had been permanently lowered. His mechanical strength made him dangerous in close combat. His force abilities remained formidable. But Lucas explained that after Mustafar, Vader became not weak, not helpless, but reduced. Vader wasn't just weaker than he used to be. He had lost a destiny. Yet despite this, he remained one of the most lethal beings in the galaxy. His telekinesis could crush and tear apart machinery. His choke could end lives with a gesture. His reflexes and precognition allowed him to deflect blaster fire and dominate opponents who couldn't even comprehend the level he was operating on. In canon stories and comics, Vader tears through enemies like a force of nature. Entire squads collapse before him. The armored machines become scrap, and skilled fighters who would be legends in any other era are simply obstacles he removes. But what makes all of this so important is not that Vader was weak, it's that Vader was incomplete. And that incompleteness created a power dynamic Palpatine could rely on. Because Vader's suit had a fatal weakness: electricity and force lightning. In the Return of the Jedi film, we see exactly what happens when Palpatine unleashes sustained force lightning. Vader's systems fail. The very suit that keeps him alive becomes a fatal vulnerability, and Vader knows it. The Emperor's signature power is uniquely lethal to the man trapped inside the armor. The scene itself makes the conclusion unavoidable. Palpatine always had a way to end Vader. No matter how powerful Vader became, Palpatine always possessed a direct way to end him. Vader could intimidate generals. He could strike down Jedi survivors. He could crush rebel forces. But in the presence of his master, the suit served as a constant reminder. His life could be shut off. The physical limitations, however, were only part of the Emperor's control. Palpatine made sure Vader lost everything. Padme was gone, the Jedi Order was destroyed, and Obi-Wan had vanished, and Vader believed his children had perished as well. Every connection to Anakin Skywalker's former life had been severed, which means he didn't just lose his body, he had also lost his identity. And what Palpatine created was a being defined by loss and self-hatred. Vader despised what he had become. He despised the suit, he despised his limitations, and most of all, he despised himself. That self-loathing became a prison stronger than any physical restraint. Because when a person believes they deserve suffering, they stop fighting to escape it. They accept and live inside it. And despite Vader's occasional attempts to challenge his master, he never truly broke free. Throughout the years, Vader sought power in the ways Sith always do. He sought control, he sought leverage, he imagined ruling instead of serving. In The Empire Strikes Back, he even tells Luke Skywalker that together they can destroy the Emperor and rule the galaxy. That's a direct statement of ambition. But Vader was not the Sith he was meant to be. He was powerful but damaged, terrifying but dependent, fearsome but ultimately predictable. And the reason is tragic. On some level, Vader believed he deserved it. That part of Anakin Skywalker, still buried beneath the armor, knew what he had done. The events at the Jedi Temple, the betrayal of the Jedi Order, the destruction of everything he once loved. Vader's suffering wasn't just survival, it became punishment, and Palpatine fed that guilt masterfully. In Revenge of the Sith, Palpatine tells Vader that his anger led to Padme's end. Whatever the full truth, what mattered was what Vader believed. The Emperor made sure Vader's pain stayed tied to shame, and shame is one of the strongest chains the mind can wear. Meanwhile, Palpatine made sure Vader was always useful, always deployed, always busy, always hunting. The Dark Lord constantly moved across the galaxy, tracking down Jedi survivors, crushing rebellion, enforcing Imperial rule. Vader became the iron fist of the Empire, clad in black armor, wielding a crimson lightsaber, breathing with mechanical menace. He became terror incarnate. And that reputation was worth more than almost anything else. A fully realized Anakin Skywalker might have become a threat even Palpatine couldn't contain. But Darth Vader, as he was, became the perfect symbol, unstoppable to everyone beneath him, and never fully free above him. Beyond that, Vader's limitations made him easier to anticipate. Palpatine knew the boundaries of what Vader could do. There were no sudden leaps in potential, no unexpected evolution that might catch the Emperor off guard. Vader was immensely powerful, but Mustafar had lowered his ceiling, and that fact shaped everything. Palpatine's long-term plans extended beyond Vader, and beyond even his own lifespan. In Legends, the Dark Empire storyline explores Palpatine's pursuit of immortality through cloning and essence transfer. The Emperor's ultimate ambition wasn't simply to rule for decades, it was to rule forever. And if Palpatine could transcend death itself, then the rule of two would become irrelevant. The entire idea of succession, master replaced by apprentice, would no longer apply. The Emperor would no longer need a future Sith to inherit anything. He would become the Sith Eternal. Yet even in that context, Vader remained valuable, not as his successor, but as a weapon, a stopgap, a terror. Much like a living warning to the galaxy that resistance was hopeless. But all of that was still a fraction of what Vader should have been. That missing potential haunted Vader because he knew what he had lost. He knew that the fire on Mustafar didn't just burn his body, it burned his destiny. In Legends, it's also clear that advanced cybernetics existed in the galaxy. General Grievous, for example, had been rebuilt into something fast, lethal, and terrifying. Vader's suit, by contrast, kept him functional, but it never truly gave him freedom. Whether by consequence or by the choices made during his reconstruction, Vader remained limited, dependent, and vulnerable. Some sources suggest Vader did receive upgrades over time, but they never erased the core truth. He would always be tied to the armor. He remained dependent on its systems, living with the consequences of Mustafar. And the real tragedy is that Vader likely understood much of it. He may not have known every detail, but he knew he was trapped. Every reflection showed him a monster. In the mirror, Vader saw what he had become: the helmet, the machinery, the lifeless mask. Even in the fearful eyes of others, the same truth stared back at him. Anakin Skywalker was gone, replaced by something inhuman. Palpatine understood the devastation of identity destruction. By encasing Anakin in a suit that made him unrecognizable, the Emperor severed the connection between past and present. Anakin Skywalker had been expressive, passionate, and human. Darth Vader was a faceless enforcer, his emotions hidden behind an emotionless mask. The transformation went beyond physical. It was an erasure of identity. His only escape was also his greatest torment. In The Empire Strikes Back, we see Vader enter his meditation chamber, the only place where he can safely remove his helmet. These moments are crucial. In isolation, the scarred face of Anakin Skywalker emerges, gasping for breath as doubt creeps in and memories surface. For brief moments, Vader is forced to confront the man he used to be. But even those moments are limited, because without the suit, Vader cannot survive for long. A cycle of dependency formed that went beyond the physical. The armor became his identity. Without it, he wasn't Anakin returned. He wasn't Vader at full power. He was simply the broken remains of a man who had lost everything. And in a twisted way, Palpatine's treatment of Vader represents the ultimate failure of the rule of two. Bane's philosophy assumed the Sith would grow stronger with each generation, that the apprentice would surpass the master and power would evolve. Palpatine, however, did not want evolution. He wanted permanence, as he wanted to rule forever. And that's why Luke Skywalker mattered so much. Luke represented a new possibility, a powerful apprentice with Anakin's bloodline, but without the damage of Mustafar and without the same psychological ruin. Palpatine sought to turn Luke because Luke was the successor Vader could never become. But the Emperor's arrogance blinded him. He never understood the light side of the Force. He never understood redemption. He couldn't fathom that love could survive what Vader had become. Vader, however, never fully let go of it, and that would destroy Palpatine. The greatest irony of all is that Vader's weakness, his incompleteness, played a role in the Emperor's downfall. If Vader had been stronger, more complete, less broken, he might have committed more fully to the dark side. He might have struck Luke down without hesitation. He might have been exactly what Palpatine wanted. But Vader's suffering left room for something else: doubt. The cracks in his armor, both literal and metaphorical, became openings for the light to seep through. And in the final moment, Vader found what Palpatine never expected: hope. When Luke refused to strike down his father and stood defiant before the Emperor, Vader saw something he thought he had lost forever. In that moment, the chains Palpatine had forged broke, not through superior strength, but through love. Vader's final act of redemption, lifting Palpatine and hurling him down the Death Star shaft, became possible only because he chose his son over his master. The Force lightning coursing through him was destroying the very systems keeping him alive. Yet, he persisted. Even as the suit failed and his body failed, he did not. The dark side promises power, but delivers imprisonment. Palpatine believed fear could sever all bonds. He never understood that love doesn't break under pressure. It grows stronger. In the end, the Emperor's most terrifying weapon became the instrument of his destruction. Not because it was flawless, but because even broken things can still choose to do the right thing.